should be done in a, oh, there it is. Oh, it does still say it's setting up, and also that it's now streaming. I think we need just a minute.
All right, we'll get started in just a minute, folks.
Okay, we look good to go.
Okay, Tracy, kick us off. Oh, you're muted.
Hi, everyone. I am Tracy Smith, your facilitator for the meeting tonight. Welcome to PCEF Grant Committee meeting. This is a Zoom-only meeting scheduled from 6 to 8:30. First, we will go over just some virtual meeting participation protocols. One, the committee meetings are open to the public. The public is invited to attend and share comments at approximately 6:05 p.m. Everyone may not have an opportunity depending on how many people sign up for the public comment, but we are scheduled to hold another meeting on January 31st, where there will be more time for public comment, and that meeting is also 6 to 8:30 p.m. There will be a break around 7:15 p.m. And at that time, it'll just say break on the screen and there'll be no online discussion. And for those who are joining, again, this is a virtual meeting, the chat box is not going to be overseen during the meeting. The staff will be looking at that later. Committee members only, as well as presenters. If you want to share comments or respond, please raise the hand, and so that way I can see you. We ask all committee members and presenters to have your video on. For the public members, please have your microphone muted. This meeting is being recorded, and closed captioning is available. It's going on during the meeting. And I'll do a quick review of the agenda. Before we have public comments, Sam will be sharing some comments along with our chair and vice chair. Then at 6:15, we'll have background and context of the funding forecast. From there, we'll look at the proposed allocations from city bureaus. And I will be going over introducing individually as the bureau directors give their presentation. And you'll see, I'm just in the chat, what we'll have, as I said earlier, a break. And then we'll continue with proposal overviews at 7:25. At 8:10, there will be committee. At 8:10, there will be committee discussion, and 8:30, the meeting will close. You'll see in the chat, if anyone online has not signed up for public comment, please put that information in the chat. And also, we would love to know who's on the call. So introduce yourself using the chat so everyone can have a kind of a meet and greet. So at this time, I would like to introduce committee members, and after the committee members are introduced, I'll introduce the staff. And as I said earlier, the bureau directors will be introduced prior to their presentation. So I will start. I'm just looking at Paul, I will start with you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Emily. I'm a citizen of the Yakima Nation and CEO for the Cascade AIDS Project. I use he, him pronouns.
Hey, everybody. Megan Horst, she, her pronouns, and co-chair of the PCEF Community Advisory Committee.
Robin.
Good evening. Robin Wang, he, him, PCEF committee member.
Faith.
Hi, everyone. Faith Graham, committee member, she, her pronouns. Nice to be with you.
Maria.
Hello, everyone. I'm Maria Sippin. My pronouns are they or she, and I'm a PCEF committee member.
All right, there's a lot of scrolling. Is D'Angelo, are you on?
I am. Thank you for introducing me, D'Angelo Moaning, PCEF committee member. I apologize for being off camera. I'm doing double duty hosting a campaign kickoff.
Alicia, are you on? And I'm just going back. Sam, is anyone, oh, Alicia, I see you. Maybe you're not able to come off camera, off mute. Oh, there you go. Well, Alicia's on. I see her name.
Alicia, we don't hear you. We see your mute off, but we don't hear you. Just heads up. I think, you got Maria? Okay. I think we're good. Ramfis.
Oh, I didn't see Ramfis there. Okay, Ramfis.
Hey everyone, Ramfis, Genovia Toro, community member, he, him pronouns. Hey everyone.
All right. Sam, I believe that is everyone, and I will turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you everyone for being here. We're going to have a fun a sequence of committee meetings between today and next week, a couple weeks after that on the 15th of February and then the 28th. And so I just wanted to, for tonight, this is certainly a busy agenda as Tracy shared a bit ago. And so I just want to thank everyone. In particular, I want to thank all of our Bureau leaders, City Bureau leadership showing up in this meeting. I just know that it's a lot, and I appreciate you all connecting here and showing, and just want to give you that thanks in advance. And then with that, I want to turn it over to Megan and Ramfis, our co-chairs, to share some brief remarks before we jump into the content.
I can go first. I can't see Ramfis, so I'll go first, Ramfis, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, hi everybody. Good to see you, PCEF committee, and lots of interested public and city agencies. We've had a lot of email communications, so I'll try to keep this relatively brief, but a lot has happened since we last convened as a committee back in December. RFP 3 is out, and we're hearing lots of interest from the community. I know we're going to hear some public comment about kind of perhaps more interest than we even expected in that. Our CIP rollout is underway, the climate investment plan. There was a winter storm last week, and I want to just quickly appreciate workers who were fixing electricity poles and down trees in the last week, and empathy for those with disrupted lives and challenges. And kind of our role at PCEF, we understand that as climate change accelerates, we'll experience more extreme weather events like that, and it becomes even more important to invest in the infrastructure, in Portland's infrastructure, and in workers. We have news of city budget challenges, kind of more detailed news than we knew back in December, which will have many impacts, one of which limits the city's ability to advance climate action. Meanwhile, we'll hear a little bit more tonight about revised again for many times now, revised revenue projections for PCEF. They're up way more than anticipated. And I want to emphasize that we are so fortunate as a city to have the Portland Clean Energy Fund that is generating revenue in a great time of need to fund important climate action work. And as PCEF co-chairs, I just want to urge commissioners, bureau leaders, and city staff, and kind of residents of our city to appreciate the foresight and hard work of Portlanders who imagined and fought for PCEF. Without them, we wouldn't even be having this conversation tonight about how to spend money. And as can be expected, one reason we're gathering tonight when we're in a time when PCEF has money, and even more money than we anticipated, and when other city bureaus are facing big budget cuts, many are turning to us right now. And I know myself, I know PCEF staff, I know BPS staff, I know commissioners are getting interest from lots of different directions to access PCEF money. And some of that interest has alignment with our values and mission, and some less so. And PCEF, as we're discussing it tonight, is not necessarily what we imagined when we started, when those of us that are on the advisory board started, or what staff thought. And, it's evolving and growing. And I think that can be a really good thing. Having more money than anticipated is a good thing. The short list of corporations who pay into PCEF have been making record profits in the last few years. And I'm glad to have additional money to advance climate action, while many Portlanders are facing rising costs of living and are on the front lines of climate change. So I'm a big fan of the problem of more money and using it to advance climate action. And I also recognize with my fellow committee members that the process and the timeline we are being pressured into are not ideal, and they're not what we would kind of want. And so I'm careful about precedents we set, and that's kind of a tone I have in mind tonight. And at the same time, I recognize that when many city agencies are struggling, that there is an urgency to our need to act, and that I hope we as a committee can use our agency and power as an advisory board on PCEF to make recommendations in a timely fashion based on kind of the proposals we're going to hear about tonight in detail, based on public comment, based on our knowledge about PCEF so far. And, Ranfis and I as co-chairs have been working a little behind the scenes to try to, in these kind of unusual circumstances, work with staff to propose and ensure a decent process that we emailed you about in advance and we'll kind of iterate on tonight, to hopefully get to a place where we feel comfortable making some sort of recommendations in a pretty short timeline. So, as usual, the values that I hope we're bringing that it will clarify and discuss are that as we hear things, we want to hear about alignment with PCEF mission and principles, about community, workforce and contractors, collaboration with federal and other state and leverage, project soundness, collaboration beyond city government, and thoughts about implementation and oversight. So that's how I'll kick off, and I'll pass to Ranfis to chime in. Thanks, Ranfis.
Thanks, Megan. I think you covered all the bases. I think I'm good to go. I guess what I'll just say, and maybe just reiterate here, one, just recognizing just the impacts of the storm that we experienced and just the likelihood of how we'll experience more events like this. And I think it just takes the entire community, really all hands on deck approach to protect one another and just protect our livelihood and our infrastructure. Very appreciative that many of Bureau directors are here and look forward to the conversation for tonight. But I think as Megan already shared, I think PCEF and the foresight of many leaders, this program is continuously being a beacon of hope, especially in light of budget challenges, not just in our city, but throughout our region. And I think, I think we will balance the needs here, but balance the needs of what's in the city code and the charter. So how do we continue to uplift just the values and principles and mission of the Portland Clean Energy Fund, the robust process. So hopefully we'll dig into that tonight, but just very appreciative, just the opportunity to engage and as committee members, really just hold the values that I think many leaders who helped create PCEF have helped uplift. So thank you all, and pass it back to you, Sam.
Sam, I wanted to confirm that I have 5 people who have signed up for public comment. Are there additional individuals that have signed up in the chat?
No, Tracy, not as yet. So let's go down the list of those that previously signed up and see if they're with us.
All right, for public comment, we're asking every individual to keep their comments to 2 minutes, and we'll start with Jason Skipton.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk with you all. My name is Jason. I work with Growing Gardens. I use he, him pronouns. But again, just like to thank you for your time and consideration in regards to investing in our community with additional PCEF funds. I've been able to work with Growing Gardens and in community-led regenerative agriculture projects for the past 14 years. We are at a unique point in our city, a time where we can stop for a moment, not get caught up in a sense of urgency, look at this situation as positive, and remember to invest in our nonprofit sector. PCEF started, and I believe will continue to center and support nonprofits, the organizations who are on the ground, working with communities to make positive and impactful changes. I also come to this meeting in collaboration with a group of 20 other organizations that represent thousands of Portlanders, most of which are disproportionately negatively impacted by climate change and who represent PCEF priority populations. We sent over written testimony to be included in these conversations. What we are asking is simple. It takes bold leaders to make brave decisions. Invest, support, and deepen the commitment to regenerative agriculture and urban agriculture in our city. This is the hardest part of the PCEF funded areas to achieve and is the least funded. This is a day in and day out commitment that works to build soil, create healthy communities, thriving food ecosystems, and to cultivate the next generation of food system leaders. This is work that is essential, difficult, and does not slow down. This work takes time and deserves the commitment of additional funding. We are asking for just 10% of the $540 million. There have only been 2 allocations of funds to date. Don't lose sight now on the original intent of this fund. Invest in our nonprofit sector, invest in regenerative agriculture, commission a report on regenerative agriculture, creating a roadmap for a holistic and inclusive food system. We need your help to make this happen. Our food system needs to be nourished and cared for. Spring is near. The time to plant the seeds of solidarity is now. I would be happy to have follow-up meetings and provide more details to anyone who is interested and to build this coalition. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jason. We'll move now to Diane, and Diane, is it Meisenhelter?
Tracy, I'm looking through the chat of the participant list, and it doesn't look like Diane's with us.
All right, we will move on to Mercedes. And Mercedes, I'm sorry, if you could pronounce your last name when you come off of mute, please.
No problem. Hello, committee members. My name is Mercedes Elizalde. I'm the Director of Advocacy at Latino Network. Latino Network provides a broad range of services that align with improving social determinants of health. And we serve about 10,000 people, mostly children, youth, and their families in the Tri-County area. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I want to thank everybody for their commitment and persistence to addressing ongoing climate change and its collateral consequences, and centering the disproportionate impact those consequences have on communities of color and low-income communities. There are so many needs across every neighborhood that it's no surprise that there is pressure to make short-term and extremely fast decisions about what to do with precious public resources. I'm sure it was not hard to come up with a long list of potential expenditures, and in fact, even though you have a long list of potential expenditures in front of you, I'm sure there was plenty of things that were not included. Many of the items on the proposed list are worthwhile investments, and I have absolutely no doubt about that. However, integrity in our public process are highly critical to ensure fairness, accountability, and transparency. Most importantly, strong and equity-focused processes also help us to ensure that we're not just meeting the moment of today, but really building resiliency that is meant to last, to adequately combat these severe and extreme weather events that we are now living under. As you evaluate proposals, please consider how you are maintaining ongoing investments in capacity building. Capacity building is not a one-time expense, but rather a consistent need to ensure that we are keeping up as needs change. All allocations should have an open and engaging application and review process. Before considering new investments or new types of investments, consider who has been given the opportunity to apply. If the answer is no one, is that really reflective of an equity-based approach or a focused strategy? The Keller Auditorium spending proposal, for example, is actually a great proposal that's more than just that one institution, but a question of, should our arts institutions broadly be able to apply for green infrastructure in order to upgrade? Rather than picking a single one with a closed application process, how can you be engaging all of the parties in an open and engaging system? While looking at the City Bureau spending recommendations, it would also be good to have some kind of application or review to ensure alignment with the underlying goals, and potentially an intentional partnership with the workforce and capacity building awardees, creating a mutually reinforcing cycle of building capacity and expertise in the community, and then putting that to work with city bureaus to accomplish great work together. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you tonight, and I really appreciate all the work that you're putting in, and I hope you stay committed to a transparent and intentional process.
Thank you, Mercedes. next we have Zachary.
Can y'all hear me? All right, there we go. Good evening. My name is Zachary Lauritsen. I'm at Oregon Walks. We're a pedestrian advocacy organization. And I appreciate that your service and just the time to give you a quick little talk today of a thing that's been in our minds. And then I feel like I'm a bit kind of jumping into the deep end here because you all are talking about huge policy and I'm coming to you with one little nugget of an idea that I just want to plant. And it's an intersection between pedestrian safety and access, which is kind of in that transportation decarbonization category, and the tree canopy shade equity work that PCEF is embarking on. And you all, I don't have to tell you all know the wonderful benefits from trees, but you may not know that there's a whole bunch of benefits to pedestrians as well. You know, they slow down vehicles visually, they provide physical protection from vehicles, they provide comfort protection through their shade. So there's all these different benefits, but there's also lots of barriers to getting trees planted. And I'm concerned, you know, even just this latest storm is with trees coming down on electrical lines and internet going out and hitting homes and even people being killed by trees that, or the electricity that was knocked out by trees that they're getting a bad rap, right? And so we really have to double down on taking down barriers for folks. And so I see the intersection between tree canopy and pedestrians in this way, and that is PCEF has an opportunity here to invest in sidewalk repair for low-income homeowners, so that is one of those barriers. Again, a very small, little, narrow lane here, which is setting aside some dollars so that homeowners who have their sidewalk destroyed by roots can have some support in having those repaired, so that the alternative, which is maybe removing the tree, and often a mature tree, is not pursued. And so I just want to plant that seed for the committee to consider and for the PCEF staff to consider of finding some dollars for our low-income neighbors to do that sidewalk repair to our pedestrian infrastructure. And that's it. I appreciate your time tonight. You'll have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Zachary. And our last individual for public comment is Heather.
My name is Heather Flint Chatto. I'm the owner and urban planner with Forage Design and Planning, and I'm director of the Portland Main Streets Design Initiative. For the last 10 years, we've been providing pro bono community design and planning support, sustainability and policy watchdog advocacy, education, and helping communities apply for grants and support them to, pursue these kinds of initiatives. There's not a lot of technical support available to communities in this capacity as we grow and change in our city. And so I would like to encourage, as you have these new resources with, the messaging that you've got additional funds, I want to just advocate for bigger picture things that we need. We do not have anything like a sustainable design and education innovation center. And I was at an emerging leaders session this morning, and people were really kind of looking for more innovation for our city that feeds our brand. It supports that kind of Portland way. And so I'd like to encourage that there are more opportunities where we can have more physical demonstration of renewable energy. I've spent a lot of my career working on zero energy buildings and educating communities. We need something that isn't just housing expertise at the city or in a university, but a place that people can walk into and get help and support and see it and touch it. Notice leaders will say, "Oh, I can't build a zero energy building," but then you take them on a tour and they go, "Well, we need to go back and change our policy and do this project." So that kind of tangible demonstration is really important, but making it visible for the community and then providing the technical assistance and education. So I want to advocate for some more resources for education centers and design centers that can provide that technical assistance as well as the experiential part of it. We also have these solar kiosk mini resiliency hubs that we are looking at to really foster embedded sustainability and visible climate responsive design and stockpile renewable redeployable emergency batteries as part of these kiosks that can foster placemaking. And so I would like to encourage more opportunities to do planning with communities. So expand your planning funding. And as we were looking at trying to find permitting for these innovative community benefits, there are not the funds and the city's community benefit permitting. Their budget is zero right now at PBOT. And so I know the city council was talking about this just last week, and could more funds be used for community benefit projects to provide offset the permitting costs? Because they already have an eligible category, but if you had something like that, that was for projects that had renewable energy as part of that, like ours do, that would open up more pathways for people to do projects that are community-based and community-led. So I want to thank you very much. I'll put some links in the chat. Thanks.
Thank you, Heather. We'll have two final commenters, and Diane, we'll start with you and we'll end with Bruce.
Thank you so much. I somehow got, okay, so I'm glad to see more money is being allocated to reducing transportation emissions, since the funding levels of the original plan were skewed, with transportation getting relatively little when it is at nearly the same level as buildings in terms of emissions here. And we also need more monies to implement the buildings sessions that so much planning was put into. While liking some of the proposed categories in transportation, it's critical that more is done towards making public transit more electrified, affordable, efficient, and incentivized, as well as building back transit ridership through public education campaigns. More categories of riders need to be able to pay nominally for public transit instead of having rate increases, especially the poor, working poor, college students, seniors, those with disabilities, and other frontline communities. Dialogue should move forward with TriMet about joint programs better than the piecemeal wallet program that the city offers, and we should be looking for projects that have the highest, quickest chance at reducing emissions and helping our most vulnerable populations. As someone who went door to door helping to get PCEF passed, I talked to many low-income families who I'm sure couldn't even afford tickets at the Snitz or Keller. So without more details, I fear that those kinds of proposals, along with the Clean Industry Initiative and possibly Fire Bureau funding, are suspect to the kinds of city backfilling slide that we're trying to avoid. These are there are tremendous needs for climate resiliency planning and funding, especially for low income and housing families and houseless families, as we witnessed these past weeks in yet another round of climate chaos. And there are plenty of tenants who need weatherization, home repairs, heat pumps with cooling capabilities, and other things that would help with conservation, reducing living costs, reducing carbon emissions, and saving lives. PCEF should stick with the priorities we campaigned on until all those needs are met. Grassroots initiatives aimed at the most vulnerable before looking to needs that patrons or others might provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. And as I said, we'll end with Bruce.
Hi, my name is Bruce Nelson. I'm here on behalf of the Volunteer Portland Urban Forestry Commission. We believe that with the passage of the Parks Levy in 2020, which added $8 million per year for 5 years for urban forestry activities, any additional PCEF money will greatly complement Portland Urban Forestry's existing programs. We support the use of PCEF funds in Set 1 to Portland Parks and Recreation for arborist workforce development. We support the use of PCEF funds in Set 1 to the Bureau of Environmental Services for allocations that include tree planting. We support the use of PCEF funds in Set 2 of $100 million for the protection and maintenance of over 240,000 right-of-way street trees. To us, the use of these dollars in support of trees is very important. This tree infrastructure investments will reduce the emergency costs, since street trees will receive critical care early in their lives. Strong oversight of the use of these tree-directed funds can provide clear communication of the actual large community benefits from these trees. These actions must include active community engagement and participation in the use of these dollars to help nurture clear, climate-resilient actions of city residents and staff. These actions work to correct the current inequitable distribution of tree canopy in our city and remove the burden of tree care from the adjacent property owner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce. I know the committee may want to acknowledge all of the folks who came and gave public comment. In the interest of time, committee members, if you would like to acknowledge those folks who've come this evening, but we would like to thank you and appreciate the time and the passion behind your messages. From here, Sam, I'm going to turn it to you.
Thank you, Tracy. I think I'm going to try to catch us up, but what I want to do in this next little bit is just for the audience, and I know committee members have heard this, but provide some quick background and context around where we find ourselves, the committee's role, and just a little brief bit on the climate investment need, and then we'll turn this over. So first up, I'd like to welcome Peter Holzman, city economist. Peter.
Yeah, Peter Holzman, he, him pronoun, city economist. And I'm here to briefly talk about why revenue has grown so much over the past few years. And Megan, co-chair, briefly actually mentioned one of the reasons. So kind of saved me a little bit of time. But first of all, a lot of things that were unexpected happened during the pandemic. You know, going into a global thing along those lines, you would expect sales to pull back, consumer spending to pull back, businesses to really struggle. And that didn't really happen for a subset of businesses. And so retail sales grew significantly over the past 3 or 4 years. And there's been little sign that they're showing any decreases. And this has to do with the switch from spending on services and going out to eat and traveling to buying goods while we stay in houses. But what's been really surprising about that is there's been, again, no signs of decreases. And part of the explanation for that is they passed on prices. We had supply chain problems, all sorts of reasons why initially firms raised their prices, and they're not really showing any signs of lowering prices. There's no deflation going on except for very specific subsets of goods. And so generally speaking, the base just grew a bunch. Additionally, the makeup of who was making that money during the past 4 or 5 years has also changed. When I look at our other revenue sources, we have the business license tax revenue source. The concentration of businesses that were paying the tax or paying a significant proportion of tax has changed a lot. It's I think 20% or 20 companies paid a huge, I think it was 100 companies paid out of 45,000 paid 40% of our business license tax, which is just a crazy change in the concentration among the top earning firms. This can also be seen with the change in online sales. We've seen a jump from 11.9% to 15.6% in 2022, the third quarter. The story is pretty easy to tell there. Smaller businesses struggled through the pandemic, while those with the online infrastructure and ability to sell remotely did very, very well. And so this is all added to the base of PCEF, or the Clean Energy Surcharge tax. And so as you can see on the graph, we have significantly updated the forecast, and I will likely update it again in April. But at this point, the forecast seems to be adequately conservative. I kind of rushed through that, and I apologize, but I'll gladly take any questions that you may have.
Megan?
Well, I don't actually have questions on the content, although even, I guess, elaborating the conservative, your thing that you're conservative would be helpful. My question, though, is related to all this, in that in the news today or yesterday, I saw about the city suing about records around who's paying Can you just, are you able to say anything about that?
That is a Department of Revenue question more so than for me. So I think I'll defer unless Donnie wants to talk about. Yeah, I was deferring to you, Donnie.
Thanks, Peter. I was looking for my mouse. Hi, everyone. Donnie Oliveira, Director of Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I use he, him pronouns. So thanks, Megan, for the question. So for context, everyone, OPB had filed the public records request to the city to get a list of all the payers into the surcharge for PCEF, and that public records request was denied by our city attorney's office, which time it was appealed to the county. The county overruled our denial, and so since then, our city attorney and revenue division have determined that the appropriate action is to protect our ability to defend not just the ratepayers or the surcharge, but for all taxpayers for the city of Portland. This is a precedent-setting moment from a legal perspective and revenue division, and largely has no PCEF staff. We have no line of sight into the revenue collection side of the program. We administer the fund once collected. So this is not a programmatic decision. This was a revenue and a city attorney's decision.
Thank you, Donnie. In the interest of time, Peter, we'll just have one question. If anyone has questions for you, Peter, we can put them in the chat. PCEF staff can capture those, follow up with you. And if folks have additional questions at next week's meeting as well, we can go through a similar process of capturing questions and following up with you and then getting back to folks. All right, so Sam, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Tracy. So I'm going to move just briefly, and it's just a reminder for folks in terms of as we move through the process, as a reminder, the committee's role, and this was part of an update that did occur in October of 2022, but the committee's role is to recommend, to update, and to amend the 5-year climate investment plan that is ultimately recommended to City Council for approval. And that plan is what captures the body and scope of the investments that the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund makes. As well, the committee's role is to evaluate the effectiveness of the program in achieving its goals. And so a lot of the conversations, as you will hear, oftentimes revolves around performance indicators, key performance indicators, and so forth. And then committee members obviously participate in a range of our subcommittees, as well as our grant application review panels, contract, RFP review panels, and whatnot. So that's just a reminder for the committee's role. And again, just and for the sake of time, I'm going to briefly just speak to, as we speak to those numbers that Peter shared, I want to just acknowledge that the scale and scope of our climate investment need just simply here within the Portland region is in the billions. And we ran a market study that captured at the scale of 50 billion for a subset of climate investments that are needed to make, that are PCEF eligible investments. 18 billion when we think about our priority populations. And this is not even thinking through our infrastructure and so forth. And then to speak to the prior commitments we've made in the climate investment plan that was recently adopted for 750 million over the next 5 years. And so it's both just to acknowledge and state for our audience, for the committee, for others that the scale of climate investment need is large, and these are critical resources and as a result, critical conversations. So with that concludes my piece here.
Donnie?
All right, thanks, Tracy. Hi, everyone. So this is the beginning of my formal part of the presentation. Again, Donnie Oliveira for the record. So I wanted to provide a little context because I think I'm just going to start out by saying where we're at in this moment is not ideal. It was not what we designed. And if I think back to even the origin story of PCEF, the vision of our community leaders to create this idea, to take it to the voters, to get it passed, and to create this wonderful program with the leadership of this committee. Everything about it has been unprecedented, first of its kind. And as Peter just alluded to, we continue to see unprecedented revenues, which continues to require pivoting on our processes and our design for what we thought the program was going to be, based on what the ballot said, to the code, to the increase in revenue. So to kind of paint a picture of where this came from, after the incredible process of engagement that was led by PCEF staff and the committee last year, resulted in the $750 million climate investment plan. And to kind of give you a snapshot of that, one of the pieces that was missing from the story, and I hope my colleagues on this meeting could corroborate this, the fact that we were able to get a $750 million climate investment plan passed by council with no amendments was also unprecedented. Took a lot of work behind the scenes, but in that process, we were really appreciating the concern that was coming out about the future state of the city of Portland's structure, our government structure with transition, the cost of business, and legitimately concerning revenue shortfalls across the city for a variety of reasons. Not about 2 weeks after City Council adopted the CIP, in which we had a roadmap to how to get those funds out to our community partners and through the strategic initiatives, we got a call from the city economist to let us know that we were likely far short of our projections in terms of what we thought the fund was going to generate. And in fact, we were probably short to the tune of about $540 million over 5 years. This information also was aligning right when we were getting our budget projections for the city bureaus. And we saw its real concerns about shortfalls, not just on pet projects, but real core fundamental infrastructure needs that keep our city running. And when I talk about that, and I'm going to allow my colleagues to speak specifically to the projects that we think are appropriately PCEF eligible, but we're talking about core functions that keep our city responsive to things like the storm that we just experienced. So with that, we began a process to think about what it might look like to find PCEF eligible projects within our bureaus, knowing that at this point, this $750 million CIP was in fact confirmed by council and protected because it had been locked in and allocated. Sam, can you advance the slide, please? Thank you. So very quickly, we realized because of the city budget process, and just for a moment of context, why this matters in the timeline we're in, and why there is a little bit more of a rush than we would ideally like to do with you all in terms of process and review, is because we are within the city budget's normal timeline for creating a requested budget. And so what that looks like is bureaus produce a requested budget that gets submitted and is published on February 15th. And so if you just work backwards from that, city bureaus need to produce a lot of information and details to get that loaded in. And that's why this particular tranche really focused on the bureau projects that were run through this particular process that I'm going to walk through. That's what you're going to be listening to today from our colleagues across the city. It's the projects that went through this sort of framing. So first, we were really clear that we weren't asking for new ideas or new projects. We were really looking at legitimately defined work plans, things that were leveraged within the climate emergency work plan, capital investment plans, or strategic plans, things that had gone through a process and validated through either community engagement, council adoption, et cetera. We asked the bureaus to submit these projects for review, and we'll kind of go through the criteria that were used. We got a lot of ideas from a lot of different bureaus, but in truth, we were really focused on those things that we could clearly identify as being climate centered. Next, we were working with our city budget office to align with this process that I just alluded to. So these projects that you're going to be hearing about would in fact be loaded into our requested budgets across the city. And then most importantly, we wanted to ensure before all this happened that we came to you all for your review and recommendation to city council. The timeline was obviously compressed. It was not ideal. And of course, when you add in the holiday time and people being out, here we are in January for a February submission. Next slide, Sam, please. And so this is a real high level framework. My colleagues have seen this slide a few times, but we're really trying to give folks something to work with on a short amount of time. I think the return was a lot of really credible projects that really speak to our ability to be responsive. And one thing I want to acknowledge here too is PCEF's existence is largely because community leaders realized the city wasn't doing enough to invest in our communities when it comes to climate mitigation, sequestration, and adaptation. And so, but that doesn't mean that there weren't solid ideas coming from the bureaus already. In fact, one of the things I want to acknowledge now is across the board, my colleagues who are here with us tonight showed up with humility and sincere earnestness to do right by the fund. There was a commitment to ensure that the programming was aligned and to have that collaborative space and spirit of understanding what we were looking for And to hear that feedback from you all tonight about how to strengthen these projects, I think is real. So I just want to offer that this was part of the process, again, on a really short timeline, but they all showed up and they all are here tonight to present to you as well. So kudos to them for that. And thank you. Many of them actually, by the way, just tangentially were were actually on the ground helping us respond as a city to the needs of our communities in response to the storm. So thank you for pivoting to this meeting as well. So to the methodology. So what we first said is the two top lines were the kind of capturing at a very high level the PCEF goals and the objectives. So obviously meaningful GHG or greenhouse gas emissions reductions or sequestrations. And this means we have to be able to calculate those emissions. So the standards we were looking for is these just couldn't be strategy. This has to be really almost you can touch the GHG emissions reduction sort of thing. And then of course, we wanted to ensure that all the projects could demonstrate community benefits. And from that, there was a lot of different ways to look at that community benefit angle, but those were the two must-haves. Those were absolute. If they didn't pass that muster, they weren't going to be included. And then we had a few other elements that we were looking for. So general fund offsetting means that we were looking for projects that would otherwise have pulled from the general fund, the city's general fund. So those projects were prioritized, assuming they met the first two categories. We were also looking for shovel-ready projects. So again, this were things in existing capital plans. We weren't asking people to create new ideas or new projects. For this first tranche, this first $280 million project list that is before you, we were really looking for things that were in the capital plan. And the last thing we were looking for, implementation ready. Again, these were things that were existing programs, things that were in either work plans or strategic plans. We weren't asking for people to cook up new ideas. We were looking for core services that could be funded. One of the slides we had at one point was you shouldn't have to squint to see if this is a climate related program or not. These need to be climate centered work plans. And so that was the sort of the methodology that PCEF staff worked with the Bureau staff to evaluate these projects so that we could come together with the list. And not to be very clear, there were projects that were pitched and recommended that were not included. We did say no to quite a few projects from across the city, not because they weren't good projects per se, but they just weren't meeting those top two line criteria of GHG reducing or community benefit center projects. So with that, I think I can take some questions on process if you'd like. But the last thing I'll say is there was a second set of projects that was listed when we announced this that totaled the 540 million. The reason why we're not bringing those to you, and it was alluded to in a couple of the talking points tonight, is those were ideas. Those were potentially, whether it was the Keller or the clean industry. There's a lot of work to be done. The difference between those and these is these projects are actually real projects that bureaus can speak to that have GHG calculations already. There's been analysis done. There's price tags. There's FTEs, et cetera. So FTE being full-time employees. So that's the distinction between the two tranches, and which is why we're here today to talk to you about the one that we can clearly define for you all. One caveat being that from that second bucket, the $100 million for street trees was brought over to this because it also met the criteria of being a work plan that can be described. So now I'll stop.
Donnie, I would like to recommend the same process of questions going into the chat and follow up by staff. We have 7 presenters and I'm going to turn it over to Ramfis before we move into the director presentations.
Sounds good.
Ramfis, were you going to share comments, or do I just move into the process?
I think move into the.
Okay, I'll move into the process. The process for the 7 presenters tonight, each presenter will have 5 to 7 minutes. After that, the committee will be asking questions for 5 to 7 minutes, and that probably will be no more than 3 to 4 questions. And again, really looking at a tight timeline, getting through these presentations. So with that, and then after all of the presentations, PCEF committee members will be able to ask questions and have more in-depth discussions as a whole. So we'll start the first presentation off. Gabe Salmer, the Director of the Water Bureau. And and hydroelectric power. Oh, and Sarah Santer is joining.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I appreciate it. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. I'm Gabe Salmer. I'm the director of the Portland Water Bureau. I use she, her pronouns. Thank you again. As you can see, I'm a bit between offices right now. I'm actually at my daughter's middle school band concert. So that was rescheduled because of the weather. So for this presentation, I'll actually leave you in the very capable hands of Sarah Santner, the Water Bureau's Resource Protection and Planning Director. But before I turn it over to her, I just wanted to thank the PCEF committee members for your service, for your trust, for your oversight of this process. And to let you know that these resources would allow us to continue parts of our work that allow us to meet the goals of the city's climate emergency work plan. I also want to let you know that we prioritize tackling our climate action work and addressing climate risks in both our 5-year strategic plan and our plan for equity, diversity, and inclusion, as well as in our new plan for reducing operational emissions. So this work is not new to us. We have a passion for climate work at the Water Bureau, and we understand that neutralizing our emissions is a necessary component of pursuing equitable outcomes for both the communities that we serve and for the employees within our workforce. So with that, I will turn it over to Sarah, and I'll go listen to a lot of very excited 11-year-olds. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe. Can I have the next slide, please? Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. I'm Sarah Santner. I'm the Director of Resource Protection and Planning for the Water Bureau. I use she, her pronouns. I'm going to try to get through 2 bureaus in 5 minutes. So if you feel like I'm just skimming the surface, no, I could talk about this forever. We are so pleased to be here today. In case you're not familiar with the Water Bureau, I hope you are very familiar with our work, but we provide drinking water to around 1 million people in the Portland metro area beyond the city of Portland. So we provide, of course, to the city of Portland and beyond. We have 2 excellent water sources, the Bull Run watershed, which we're going to talk a little bit more as you learn about some of the projects we've proposed, and the Columbia South Shore well field, which is our groundwater supply. The 2 supplies work in tandem, and this last year has been a real exercise for us in experiencing climate, sort of in real time. We had a Camp Creek fire in the Bull Run watershed this summer, late summer, early fall, and then the ice storm that we all experienced. We had over 4,000 calls from our community members who needed our help to go out and shut off water meters so their homes and properties and businesses weren't destroyed. We also had additional main breaks, of course, in the system that is our system, our collective system. We view climate action as critical to our mission. As a water provider, we really feel like we're on the front lines of this. We are seeing stream flow declines. We are seeing greater impact to our community, and we are seeing greater impact to our staff who are working in the field, experiencing extreme heat or extreme cold or ice events like we saw. We have a budget of around $432 million. And I'm going to just talk very briefly. We are national leaders in climate work. We're part of the Water Utility Climate Alliance. And we're a founding member. We've been for about 10 years. It's an extraordinary group of folks who work around the nation to advance climate work within the water utility and sewer utilities. We're excited to talk about our work here. And so I just want to say that the funding opportunity that we have here is work that will help us advance our goal of achieving net zero, which is consistent with the city's goal. We're part of that work. So we really are pleased to talk a little bit about our projects. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk again, as I said, about 2 bureaus. So I'm going to talk specifically about the Portland Water Bureau. And when I move into the Bureau of Hydroelectric Power, I'll talk a little bit about that. We have 3, kind of buckets of projects that are funded. The first is our low-income home water leak repair program. It's an existing program that's been around for nearly 30 years. And through that program, we provide free water leak repair assistance to low-income community members. We serve typically about 100 households each year, and this money will allow us to expand that work. We hope to double or triple our ability to serve. After this ice storm, we know how many community members are really struggling. A water leak can cost thousands of dollars, both in sewer and stormwater fees, but then to repair it. This program has really helped keep, sort of financially insecure folks in their home, and it is a critical piece of our work to support community. This project also, and I can talk about this on the next slide, has some, clear benefits for greenhouse gas reduction, both through repairing the water leaks, so water is not wasted, and water, of course, has to be treated and pumped, moved through the system, and then on any hot water that also has embedded energy in it. The second bucket is some energy efficiency work that we've proposed. This is work that includes an energy savings performance contract, which would allow us to identify further energy efficiency opportunities within the properties and the buildings, the facilities that the city owns through the Water Bureau. So these are our community assets. And then the second one is some energy efficiency improvements that we have planned at our operations facility. Our operations facility is critical to our ability to respond to events like the ones we just experienced. And we have proposed a heat pump to replace our gas boiler, as well as some electrical controls, which help improve the HVAC efficiency. Our third bucket is really exciting. It's a renewable energy bucket. We have a plan to install a micro hydro turbine at the Washington Park facility, which we own. It's being redesigned and new reservoirs are being built. And we had an opportunity to generate some power there. So that's a really exciting technology. It's something that as a water provider, we're sort of uniquely positioned to explore. We have one that, we have done, previously that is successfully generating energy. It's an exciting project. And then we have some solar. We want to do a full solar assessment of our properties and our opportunities and expand our solar. We have a solar array we've had for about 20 years. And so we're looking for additional opportunities to expand our solar capacity. The dollar figures that we have asked for are on the screen there. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Climate benefits. So I talked just at a really high level about those climate benefits. We have calculations. We have a climate analyst who provided some detailed information to the PCEF team when we were invited to sort of submit our concepts. So there's some information on the slides. I am going to move past this slide rather quickly. I hope you all can see it and read the numbers for yourselves, but there are measurable and significant value from a climate perspective. Next slide, please. From a community perspective, the home water leak repair is definitely the gold standard from the projects that we have submitted. It is an extraordinary partnership. We have the African American Alliance for Homeownership and the Community Energy Project. We are looking to expand with this program our additional community partnerships. Those relationships are fantastic. And, the money we will receive goes back to those community organizations who deliver the services. As far as other community or, we were asked to sort of talk about contractor opportunities. There are some coming up through the other proposals, the energy savings performance contract or the installation of the heat pump. We could do that. The Water Bureau is very committed to meeting equity and diversity goals in contracting. It's something that we are quite proud of. So we would want to make those opportunities open. And on renewable energy, the micro hydro is already bid out, so that one is not available. But on solar, certainly something we could look for community partnerships. Next slide, please. Do you want me to take questions on this or go to hydro? Yeah. Okay.
Let's go to hydro. Okay,
hydro's fun to talk about. Next slide, please. So you may not know this. Did you guys know that we have a hydro facility that we own as the city of Portland? It's kind of extraordinary. It's actually a separate bureau from the Water Bureau, although the Water Bureau oversees it. It's a separate fund and it's directly connected to the general fund. We have two powerhouses on the water supply dams in the Bull Run watershed. So we have supply dams that were built prior to the hydroelectric. They were built after as a secondary value and secondary purpose. We started producing in 1982. And since that time, it's returned about $13 million of net revenue to the general fund. So the hydro facility is tied to general fund. We do not use rate dollars for hydro. It generates a significant amount of energy, somewhere between 8,000 to 10,000 homes. And it is a critical non-emitting regional power source. The budget for this bureau is $3.4 million. Next slide. So here are the three projects that we have proposed. The first is some upgrades to critical electrical components within the powerhouses themselves. The next slide has a lot of detail on that. This is a limited duration request, about $3.5 million. It will allow us to continue to generate electricity, low emissions electricity, and it will improve the efficiency of that generation. The second project are to help pay for the cost to relicense the hydroelectric facilities. The city is in a process right now where we need to reapply for our license that allows us to operate those facilities. The cost is, we anticipate it to be around $6 million over the next 5 years. And so our request was for PCEF to support that to allow the city to continue to generate this resource. The Water Bureau will pay for the other half of that because the dams serve multiple purposes, water supply and hydro. And so that one is, just to be clear, that's 50-50 split. We didn't ask for the Portland Water Bureau side. We wanted to focus on the hydro side. And then the third element is a reserve fund. So because hydro generates different amounts of energy each year based on the water available, the revenues can generate over time. And so this reserve fund would actually just provide a little bit of security, a little bit of protection from the general fund to allow hydro to continue to operate, even though it is a little bit variable. Next slide, please. The community benefits, the PHP is sometimes what we call it, but our hydro facilities generate a significant amount of clean energy, which is critical to our regional supply system. PGE relies on this production as part of its renewable portfolio, and it is critical for the community at large that we continue to generate this resource, this emissions-free resource. So next slide on climate benefits, or next slide, sorry. The next one is the community benefits. So again, this is sort of that meta level of community benefit in terms of having the emissions-free source available. And there is limited opportunity to address equity in contracting. There aren't very many vendors who work on hydroelectric projects. And so we will look for opportunities where we can, but it is probably fairly limited, just to be honest, opportunity there. The relicensing process will have a very broad community engagement effort with community members and with tribal nations. And that work is already beginning and underway in terms of planning. Okay, I think that's the last of my slides, and I'm only a little bit over time.
Thank you, Sarah. Committee members, do you have questions or comments? Paul?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for the FERC relicensing, but first of all, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate that. What is the cycle for FERC relicensing? Is it every 5 years or longer?
It's longer. I believe that it's a 40-year cycle. We got the first license, I believe, in 1979. So I believe it's a 40-year cycle. I don't know if Gabe's still on the line and may be able to correct me if I'm wrong there, but it is quite long. And we have an opportunity, the next FERC license it has a little bit of a range. FERC kind of determines based on the impact what the range of the license could be.
Great, thank you. And on the reserve fund proposal, how does creating a reserve fund provide direct benefits to the mission of the Portland Clean Energy Fund?
So when hydro doesn't generate enough revenue from year to year, again, if we have a really low water year, we can't generate as much electricity. So when we don't produce enough water, we tap into the general fund to, provide the sustained funding for the operations and maintenance of that facility. And so the concept here is that by having a PCEF funded, sort of barrier cushion between the general fund, it allows the general fund to put those resources towards additional community needs. So that's our framing on the community benefit there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Robin?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to follow up on that. It's my understanding that the hydro fund, and sorry if I'm not using the right terminology here, I've read that it's lost money for several years in a row. And so essentially this reserve fund is a subsidy to subsidize the losses of the hydroelectric. I'm curious if you can comment on that.
I mean, I do think that from year to year, there will be losses, right? That's just the natural part of the water year cycle. We can't always generate electricity. And so to some degree it is, but over time, what we've seen, in tracking the production is that we do end up earning the revenue that pays it back. So, it's been $13 million. It's not a tremendous amount of money to the general fund, but the climate benefit is part of that story as well. And so, that's a conversation that, you all may have a different perspective on that than we do, but we do see the value certainly in continuing to generate the low emissions energy.
Yeah, and I certainly understand variability in the revenue. You know, just to keep this short, if this is a 5-year allocation, I'd like to see a 5-year historical financials that itemize how much the reserve fund has been tapped into for the past 5 years, so that we can have some sense of, you know, PCEF's impact for the future 5 years.
That makes sense. Paul, back to you. Oh, sorry, Tracy, I should let you do that.
Oh, no, that's.
Thank you. Maybe this is more of a question to staff, and we can talk about this later, but you know, I understand the presentation and the rationale, but I have to express some concern that if we allow a reserve fund to be created for this purpose, that our other grantees might also be able to make the case that they also could use reserve funds. So I just want to be careful with this proposal, maybe understand it a little bit more and find out if this is truly unique, or are we setting a precedent here for other grantees? Thank you.
I'll take the last question. That'll be coming from you, D'Angelo.
Thank you, and I apologize if it's a little loud, but I appreciate you being transparent about the limited opportunities for contracting opportunities with this particular endeavor. But I am curious to how you're going to identify opportunities for minority contractors, or if there are opportunities.
Was that specific to the FERC and hydro work, or to all the things I discussed?
To all, but we can go specific if you like.
Yeah, so just in general, the Water Bureau has a strong approach of, you know, working through city systems to do this kind of outreach. I am not, you know, I wish my colleague who runs our engineering division is here, because she can talk much more fluently about these large contracts and the type of work we do to collaborate with contractors. So I may need to get back to you on that, D'Angelo, to have a fully thorough answer for you.
Okay, definitely. I'd love to connect you about that. Thank you.
Sam, I would like to ask you a process question. It's now 7:10. We're scheduled for a break at 7:15. My recommendation is that we take a quick 5-minute break and come back and lead with the Bureau of Environmental Services.
I'm looking to Don because Don's right. Don, will that work for you timing wise?
Absolutely, I'm fine with that. Yes, let's please take a break.
Okay, let's go ahead and do the break, and then Tracy will check in on timing, because I know we're a good bit behind here.
Correct.
Can you all hear me?
Did you get an answer, Sam? We can hear you.
I got a nod. I never know with these headphones. Yeah. For all the committee members who used to see me in a different background, we moved, so we're in a different home, and now my kid's room is right there. So you all got to be in my ear here. All right, Tracy, I think let's kick us off.
All right, everyone. I would just like to remind the directors to please try to keep your presentations within that 5 to 7 minute time frame, given where we are right now with timing. Committee members, I would also, I originally said 3 to 4 questions. I'm now going to ask that we limit it to 3 questions. Again, we'll be able to capture your comments in chat. Also, I have a question for you. Oh, and some bureau directors may need to jump off after they're done presenting. And again, we will capture your questions and PCEF staff will take those questions back to that particular bureau. Committee members, I'm asking if you're willing to stay on till 9 o'clock this evening in order to have that group discussion, the committee group discussion. If everyone could, I can't see, I see Paul, your hand is up. Thank you, thumb is up. Megan, what about you?
Yes, I can.
All right, and I'm just, Ranfis?
Sorry, that was my virtual thumbs up. Having a hard time finding the thumbs up.
Okay, I couldn't see Ranfis, thank you. Maria?
Yes.
And D'Angelo, I hope.
Faith.
And Faith.
Yep.
Okay. All right. We will now begin with the Bureau of Environmental Services. Don, I'll let you introduce yourself. Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you, Tracy. And thank you, everyone. It's a delight to be here. And I'm so inspired by the energy and commitment in this room. And I'm really delighted to share our program offers to this afternoon or this evening. So my name is Dawn Uchiyama, and I'm the director of the Bureau of Environmental Services. I use she, her pronouns. And you can go to the next slide. Like the Water Bureau, we are deeply committed to climate and community engagement and realizing community benefits. It's interwoven to our mission and our vision, and it's a part of everything that we do. But BES is the sewer, stormwater, and watershed. We provide sewer, stormwater, and watershed services, and we're the wastewater and stormwater utility for the city of Portland. We're responsible for planning, operating, maintaining all aspects of the city's watershed and stormwater systems. We work with community to restore streams and watersheds to protect water quality, public health, and the environment. Our annual budget is $727 million. Next slide. We proposed our funding in 3 categories for a total of $77.5 million for the 5 years. And BES's collection of projects and programs grow the city's climate adaptation and carbon sequestration primarily using nature-based solutions and blue-green infrastructure that support watershed, community, and cultural resilience. So we have 3 categories: watershed, natural systems, restoration, and biological sciences. Really focusing on the watershed as a system and how our assets interface with the natural system, looking at the watershed as our unit of management, focusing on habitat and wildlife and our commitment to natural systems. This is a program that we've had for several decades, and the funding request is ongoing at $17.5 million. The second area is stormwater management, blue-green infrastructure, and revegetation. This is directly related to programs like our green streets and managing our stormwater conveyance system as it interfaces with our natural areas. This is also ongoing for a total of 53 million. And then the third area is private property, planting trees on private property, also helping with maintenance and outreach and some other community engagement efforts. And that's a total of 7 million. So our work is with community, has been in place in the Bureau for a long time. And we can speak directly to the climate benefits. You can go to the next slide. So when we think about our work and our assets, we think about our vegetation, trees and wetlands and saturated organic soils as the foundation of our blue-green infrastructure and the watershed restoration work that we do. We design, construct, and enhance these areas and ultimately end up protecting them. These resources ultimately provide the highest carbon sequestration potential. BES conservatively estimates PCEF funding will result in over 400 metric tons of CO2 sequestered per year, in addition to the 11 million pounds of CO2 from trees. So this is a substantial contribution to our efforts here. These projects also reduce, very importantly, reduce damage from flooding. They restore cultural resources such as salmon and camas, and they reduce stream temperatures and urban heat island. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned at the beginning, our work is deeply woven in community and also with our workforce development, and we see many opportunities here. In fact, there are so many, we're really having to highlight just a few that have really driven our relationships in the community and driven our program development. BES's projects reduce localized flood impacts, remove homes and businesses from flood insurance requirements, and contribute to a citywide 25% discount on flood insurance. Our projects occur citywide, but the Bureau is expanding its work and benefiting environmental justice communities in Arrowhead Heights, Lents, East Portland, and the Columbia Slough areas. We're also centering on Indigenous and traditional ecological knowledge in our design and management. We restore first foods such as salmon, lamprey, and have a commitment to restoring riparian and wetland plant communities. We also, throughout all of this work that we've done over the many years we've been doing this, we contract with several minority-owned businesses for natural area habitat restoration services, including Wisdom Workforce, who provides internships for Native American adults. We also partner with PSU's Lewis Stokes Alliance for minority participation in their internship program, which supports students from racially underrepresented groups pursuing and earning a bachelor's degree in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Our interns work part-time with BES on our climate and our disaster resilience projects. So that's a brief summary. I stayed under, I believe, the 5 minutes, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Don. I'll take now 3 questions from committee members.
I guess I can chime in here. This is Rand Feast, Continuing Tour Committee member. Thank you, Don, for the presentation, and appreciate you taking the time to be here and providing us this overview. And yeah, just again, thank you for this proposal. I think the question I just have for you, as someone who on the committee really cares about contracting and workforce, just kind of thinking here, like is there room in this proposal where you're all thinking around just thinking more and more about how you move the needle on workforce and contractor equity? Very appreciative to hear, in terms of like how you're involving PSU's internship program, but just kind of curious, like for a 5-year plan, how as an institution or agency are you all thinking about, thinking about how you take those internship opportunities to potential hire opportunities? Like what are other ways that BS is thinking about workforce equity? I'll just point out at in PCEF we have a pretty high standard around workforce and contractor equity and the promotion of registered apprenticeship programs. How's that reflective or compatible with how BES approaches that work or within this proposal?
Yeah. I'd certainly like to follow up and provide you with more data, because I know that we have, as I said, over the decades, worked with many different program areas and contract efforts. And so I know I can provide you some hard numbers on that. But what we have really been focused on is maximizing partnerships with smaller minority-owned vendors. And we really look for vendors who are not interested in, like, or don't have the capacity to do really large city projects. So we're really trying to start with firms that are small and looking to grow. And so we've had some really good experiences in that space, and I can provide the names and some numbers of the folks that we've worked with. And we're also really focused on building relationship in the community, so that it isn't just a contracting experience where we're paying someone to do work, but we really look for opportunities to build a relationship and connect with people and have a long-term commitment. And I know with many of our interns who get to work on these projects, we have hired folks back. Students have been inspired to go back and get their degree. They have a full sense of public service and the kind of work that we're doing. So I would like to, as I said, follow up with some specifics on this. But it really has been integrated into the development of these programs over the years, and we continue to evolve. I think that's one of the things that I'm very impressed with. Our staff are really on the ground, listening to what community needs are and adapting the programs to move into new communities, new relationships, and always looking for to meet the needs as they're stated.
Thanks, Don. And I'll just maybe give you some flowers for your agency on the work on the Columbia wastewater treatment plan and the community benefit agreement on that project, and hear great things from advocates outside who talk about the labor management community oversight committee as a model of tracking workforce and contracting data. And so,
thank you so much for bringing that forward. That is definitely one of the highlights of our work right now, and we're exceeding expectations. The goals are we're blowing past the goals, and we're growing all sorts of new opportunities for our workforce. So thank you for bringing that forward. Really appreciate it.
All right, the last question will come from you, Faith.
Hi, Don, and thank you so much for your thoughtful presentation. My question, I just had a misunderstanding, I think, or a lack of understanding anyway, around whether or not the three proposals that you put forward are new programs or expansion of existing programs, or on the books but not yet having been operational. I'm just trying to understand what's the impact of additional PCEF dollars coming into these programs.
I see. Yeah, I'm sorry that wasn't clear. No, they're all existing operational programs. So that was a very clear direction. No new, we're not inventing new things or bringing new things to the table. And we currently at BES, our work is both with wastewater and stormwater has the more direct connection with our natural systems, although wastewater does too, because ultimately after we clean the water, it gets discharged into the Columbia River. But we have really a large backlog of asset maintenance and risk with our treatment plant and our pump stations. And if we have to prioritize the risk and the backlog of work, it was pointing in the direction of having to downscale some of these other programs that we have so much connection and love for. So it was really, when this opportunity came up, it was, such a great fit for our work with your program goals. And it's meeting a very serious, significant need in the city because we're having to invest now in our treatment plant and our pump stations and some of the hard assets. And this funding will allow us to keep steady and continue the work that has been happening for decades. So it's all operational, it's all existing, it's all kind of proven on the ground efforts that we've been growing and committing and investing in for many years.
Okay, thank you. And it's not an expansion, it's a maintenance at current
That's
level.
correct.
All right,
That's
thank you,
current service level. Yep.
Megan, and this will be the final question before we move on to the Housing Bureau.
Yeah, my question, and it's probably one relevant for other presentations too, but it just came up on your slides, Dawn. I think that we as a committee are understanding that these are, opportunistic funding allocations, and yet you note ongoing funding needs. How is your Bureau planning to deal with the reality that we are expecting these to be short-term, if allocated short-term funds, and not to rely on these funds when you have ongoing needs?
Thank you for this question, Megan. It's really complicated, and I'll do my best to answer succinctly. As you know, the city is going through a change in government, our transition project, and we're reorganizing our services and how we deliver those services. And we currently have an effort that all of the bureaus that are almost all of the bureaus that are represented here tonight are working on a long-term vision to bring city services together in a more coordinated way. And to ensure resourcing and improved service delivery. So this is a bridge to this bigger future, and it's bringing us together around this work in new ways. So it's the timing couldn't be better because it's forcing us to come together to articulate our shared goals for the community to see all of the bureaus' contributions in this space. And I think through city transition and the reorg, we're going to be able to grow what we start here in a more kind of hardwired way in the city. So it's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Well, now
Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll move now to Michael from the Housing Bureau.
Thank you, Tracy. Good evening, committee members. My name is Michael Bodacour. Small edit to the slide. I'm the interim director at the Portland Housing Bureau, meaning my expertise is not necessarily quite at the depth that it would be otherwise, but I'm happy to take any of your questions. And if I don't have the answers, we'll make sure that we get them to you. So next slide, please. The team has provided lots of information on these slides for you. What I will tell you briefly about the Portland Housing Bureau that most folks know about us is that one of our primary roles is in the funding of new affordable housing and in the preservation of existing affordable housing, which is, those are the ways in which we are engaging the PCEF funds. Next slide, please. So our current partnership with PCEF is $60 million over 5 years, which provides grants to nonprofit affordable housing providers in order to increase the energy efficiency of new and redeveloped affordable housing in our community. Next slide, please. So here you've got some information about commitments we have already made to projects that have opened or are in the pipeline. And you see in the bullets here some of the ways in which we invest PCEF funds to ensure that the quality of the living environment for folks is good and the sustainability of the buildings is really solid. And something we know about the health disparities in people of color and people with low incomes is that part of the contribution to poor health outcomes is the lived environment that people experience. So by making sure that there are high quality, energy efficient features in these new developments, we help to both improve impacts to the climate and also to the health and well-being of the folks who live in these new developments. Next slide, please. So what we are engaging with you all in sort of the next phase, in which we will receive up to $10 million of PCEF funds per year, is to apply the same principle to new development as we do to the rehabilitation of existing affordable housing. Next slide, please. Oh, that went fast, but essentially, sorry, the idea there is that our first tranche of funding provides energy efficient development of new affordable housing, and the new investments will help us to provide that kind of support to existing affordable housing where rehabilitation work is underway. So this helps us make sure that for buildings that may have been in operation for decades have the ability to upgrade and make repairs that are necessary for the ongoing healthy operation of those buildings, but also that we can improve the quality of the built environment for people who are living in not just newly built developments, but in existing properties. So here you see some of our goals around contracting, and we have a link to some of our outcomes that is embedded in the slide here. So there's our community benefits emphasize our contracting outcomes, as well as the outcomes for the folks who live in our households. Next slide. There we go. Yeah, I did that fast. So I welcome your questions and comments.
Thank you, Michael. Committee members, questions for Michael? Robin?
Yeah, thanks for sharing it. Just a couple clarification questions. Partnership 1, is that funded through the CIP? And partnership number 2 is this additional tranche of funding? And if my understanding is correct, partnership 1 is new affordable housing, and partnership number 2 is existing housing upgrades and retrofits to existing housing. Is that the big difference?
That's correct, yes.
So partnership number 2 hasn't happened yet?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ranfis?
Yeah, I guess, don't expect an answer today, Michael. Once again, thank you for your presentation. I think it's true in this area, might be true for a few other areas. It seems like these projects would additionally be eligible for federal tax credits or direct pay, whether you're purchasing equipment or solar and renewable technology. How does, I guess a two-part question, how does the Bureau aim to take advantage of those direct tax credits and or direct pay? And how will you, and how will that help in terms of, whether it's future funding or what's the goal with direct pay or federal tax credits being taken advantage for those programs? And the second piece, some of those federal tax credits also have labor standards, labor components, such as Davis-Bacon prevailing wages. I'm not too nuanced to know if there's exceptions on clean energy, on affordable housing, as well as standards and requirements related to apprenticeship. Some of it that might be compatible with PCEF. Some of it might be different and unique that PHB may not have experienced. Just curious, all the thinking around one, just direct pay and federal tax credits, how are you all planning leveraging that? And two, how does it influence or shape the workforce and contracting standards moving forward?
So Michael, would that be a question for Donnie to answer, or would you like to respond?
I would not stop Donnie from answering. I mean, in order to really authoritatively answer it, I will make sure that we loop back and get you the technically correct answer.
Yeah.
So Ramses, if you could save that question for at the end of the presentations. All right, if there's I'll ask for one final question or comment from a committee member before we move on to Bureau of Transportation. All right, Michael, thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
We'll now have Millicent Williams with, as I said, Bureau of Transportation.
We've got to unmute you, Director Williams.
You would think that after 4 years of doing this, we would figure that out. But anyway, as I was saying, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. My name is Millicent Williams. I am the director of the Portland Bureau of Transportation, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to join you to share about PBOT's proposed PCEF allocations and our deep commitment to our environment, community, and climate. PBOT is more than a transportation agency. We're a community partner in shaping the Portland we want to be, and you can advance to the first slide. As we do that, we focus on planning, building and maintaining a transportation system that is safe, convenient, and attractive, all while managing our transportation assets. Next slide. As you can see from this infographic, our Bureau is responsible for an expansive, multimodal $19.7 billion transportation system that touches the lives of Portlanders every day. That includes 7,474 bike racks, 434 centerline miles of bikeways, 3,200 miles of sidewalks, and so much more. You can advance to the next slide. When we developed our most recent strategic plan in 2019, we asked staff to center 2 questions in everything we do. Will it address equity? And will it reduce carbon emissions? These guiding questions apply to our planners and engineers working on projects like 82nd Avenue and plans like the North Portland in Motion Plan, as well as the folks filling potholes, updating street signs, and issuing parking tickets. It's in our organization's DNA. You can go to the next slide. As you can see from this chart, we still have a lot of work to do. Even as we center these values, we know that 40% of our region's greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation. We're seeing increases in transportation greenhouse gas emissions even as we embrace a goal to reach net zero by 2050. Decarbonizing our transportation system requires both intention and new resources. Next slide. As you're probably aware, PBOT is in a budget crisis that is threatening our ability to continue important programs that serve our community and address the carbon emissions in the transportation sector. While PBOT has a $509 million budget, our discretionary revenues are only 1/4 of that. As you've likely heard by now, the areas that we rely on for funding, specifically the gas tax and parking revenue, are declining fast. Because our goal is to reduce reliance on fossil fuels and single occupancy vehicles, the 2 main sources of transportation funding, the more we succeed, the more we put ourselves out of business. We are actively working to find sustainable revenue sources, but don't have solutions just yet. That is why PCEF funding is extremely important for PBOT, and it keeps us focused on our big goals. That's why I'm so grateful to be here tonight. PCEF's generosity will ensure, or help to ensure, that PBOT can maintain our focus on equity and climate-focused projects and programs during our budget crisis. You can move on to the next slide. The PCEF proposal includes $30 million to replace streetcars. This will allow us to avoid service cuts and to continue work to expand the Portland streetcar system, which operates on 100% renewable energy, making it one of the most climate-friendly transit options available to Portlanders. The proposal also includes $2 million per year to fund active transportation, maintenance, and operations. This will help us to maintain the active transportation infrastructure of bike lanes and multi-use paths that we've already built. One of the most painful cuts that I had to propose as director is to our small capital program that funds community responsive projects that improve our bike and pedestrian networks. These projects are often greenway improvements, new pedestrian crossings, or bike lanes. This PCEF allocation would allow us to continue and expand this important program. Another particularly painful cut that I had to propose was to community-facing education and encouragement programs, including safe routes to schools and Sunday parkways. These programs are both more than having fun. They are important ways for us to encourage people to make climate-friendly trips by biking, walking, and transit as an alternative to driving, and for PBOT to build enduring, collaborative relationships with Portlanders. Finally, replacing funding for LED streetlights will allow PBOT to continue to convert and replace streetlights with LEDs and pay for green energy to operate our streetlights. Next slide. PCEF investments will help us shift Portlanders to different, more climate-friendly modes of travel. It will help us expand and improve our biking and walking routes, activate those facilities, and encourage people to use them. It will help us to continue to operate a viable streetcar system that replaces car trips with an all-electric transit trip. PCEF investments will also help us clean up our own house by replacing and converting streetlights to more efficient LEDs. Next slide, please. Investments of PCEF funds at PBOT allow us to continue to provide equity-focused community benefits and workforce and contractor equity opportunities. Perhaps most importantly, it will provide stable funding for programs that employ union workers making livable wages. When we contract work out, we focus on getting at least 30% of all dollars to women, minority, and veteran-owned businesses. Our investments prioritize frontline communities. The streetcar, as an example, serves riders who are more diverse and more likely to be transit dependent than other riders in our region. We look forward to partnering with PCEF to decarbonize our transportation system and prioritize the needs of frontline communities. Thank you again for the opportunity to share these proposed allocations with you this evening.
Thank you. Any questions for Millicent? Maria?
Thank you. Thanks for everyone's presentation so far and stepping up to this challenge of giving us a quick run through of your big and grand proposals. Can you tell the committee how PBOT plans to still get closer to a decarbonized transportation future, even without PCEF funding? What are some big and clear ways you can achieve that?
Well, we work toward that every day. As I mentioned, even when we developed our strategic plan in 2019, that was a focal point for us to make sure that we were reaching those goals. We recognized that it would be very difficult, but we worked toward that anyway. What I'd like to share is that the PCEF investment really just bolsters our opportunity to do that more quickly and more sustainably. So the funding source that we know will extend for 5 years will make a really meaningful difference to allow us to advance that work more quickly, more holistically, and to create a more complete network. But the work would have continued had we not received the funding. We have plans in our strategic plan and in our capital plan, our CIP, to do roadway projects, to do bike lane projects, to do sidewalk projects, to create safe and clean and green spaces for people to use. So that work would have continued. We just have the opportunity to increase that and to have a future planning opportunity because of the sustainability of the funding.
As a follow-up, can you quickly describe how this PBOT proposal was community informed and how you arrived at this?
Well, most of our projects anyway, that we propose to build, design, deliver for community has a community engagement component. And so the conversations that we've been having with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability are longstanding and things that are consistent with what we are focusing on as our goals. The plans, and this was mentioned as Director Oliveira was talking about the requirements, the plans that we have and the identification of the projects comes from having the opportunity to have done the pre-work and the pre-engagement with community on their priorities. And so the shovel readiness of the projects created the opportunity for us to pull on opportunities and conversations that we had with community over the course of the past several years that helped to define and inform what was important to them. And so you'll see, if we had the opportunity to further demonstrate in the limited amount of time that we have, all of the ways that this reflects a community engagement component, you'd see that those projects are not ones that we just pulled out of our hats, but rather that we pulled off of the shelf that provided that were, and those projects were informed by community. So, but we don't do many projects without fairly deep engagement. And so we wouldn't propose to put anything forward in this case that was not something that had been vetted and tested by community.
Is there a committee member have one more question? All right. I think that wraps it up for you, Millicent. Thank you.
Well, that is great. Thank you so much. Again, thank you for your consideration. This does go a very long way to ensure that the Portland Bureau of Transportation is able to continue to do this really important work. And I do have to mention that while we do have a budget crisis and the allocation that has been recommended will help to address that, it is not, in our view, the investment is not being provided to help to save the Bureau, but rather to support the work that is central and key to what we recognize PCEF's goals are around climate and equity.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll now move to Maddie Sauter, Manager, Division of Asset Management and Office of Management and Finance.
Hi, good evening, committee members. It's great to be here. As noted, my name is Maddie Sauter, and I run what is maybe the most obscure bureau presenting tonight, which is the Division of Asset Management. So we are an internal service fund that essentially serves as a support backbone for the bureaus that provide direct public service. And I actually have two groups under me. One is the Office of Management and Finance's Facilities Organization, which has buildings like the Kirby Garage, the 911 Center, a lot of the public safety facilities, and then there's also City Fleet. I do want to note that we will at some point in time, perhaps in a second tranche of funding, come forward with a proposal for our facilities organization. That's where we have a lot of HVAC work. And because we are an internal service fund that is only funded through Bureau contributions through rates, there is no external funding for us available. A lot of our facility assets are extremely decayed. About 83% of that asset base needs to be replaced. And we have about a $500 million need in that space for essentially backbone facilities for the city. But we didn't feel it was prudent to bring that forward in this tranche right now. We may be coming forward with something actually specifically for fleet going forward. Our Kirby Garage is over 100 years old and has no fire protection. It's where we weld, so it's not a very safe facility. But right now we brought forward the thing that was most evidently in alignment with the mission right now. So if you want to advance the slide, this is for our fleet organization. Fleet is an 82-member organization. We have about a $33 million operating budget, and we manage the entire life cycle ecosystem of fleet services for all city bureaus. So this is everything from acquisitions to maintenance, repair, parts to disposition. And a lot of people may not know what the fleet is, but the fleet is actually a keystone essential services operation. So if you like snowplows that come and get things off of your streets, you like fleet. If you like aerial pickers that could come and help with urban forestry efforts and get people up into power lines, you like City Fleet. So again, we're an organization that's not well known, but we do critical urgent response. The city has the biggest fleet in the state, municipal fleet in the state. We have almost 4,000 units and 2,600 of those are on road. And about 50% of that is a light duty fleet and 50% is medium heavy duty. So we have everything from tut-tut trucks and sedans all the way up to Vector trucks and SWAT vehicles for the police. And we are a huge contributor, quite frankly, to carbon emissions ourselves. We have nearly 12,000 megatons of metric tons of carbon that we emit every year. And so for quite a while, Fleet has had a green fleet plan that puts us on a pathway to net zero. But that plan has been really challenging to implement. Some of that has to do with our foundational responsibility as an essential service provider, meaning that a lot of our vehicles really don't have a market opportunity yet for conversion to EV, for example, dump trucks. And yet those trucks need to be replaced every year. And if we don't have them, then we can't perform central operations that frankly, all of the infrastructure bureaus today here spoke about. We provide the fleet to them to then go out and do that work. We also have a very diverse array of equipment types, which makes conversion challenging. And quite frankly, there wasn't an ecosystem for many years that we to support fleet conversion. We had to build that working in partnership with the Oregon Public Utilities Commission, with local utilities to create opportunities for fleet partners that we then took advantage of for infrastructure piloting. And then that opportunity is now extended to other fleets in the state that are privately owned. So we had to work really hard to build an ecosystem to even do the type of fleet conversion that we wanted to do at scale. A lot of that is now in place, but what we're really seeking now is funding for the bureaus to be able to continue to support that conversion. Next slide, please. So what we're seeking as part of our project is basically a first tranche of funding, and we are looking to rapidly escalate EV conversion in the next 5 years. So bureaus have to pay for new vehicles, but there's always a price premium for EVs, for the charging service, for the infrastructure, et cetera. So for example, when you hear that PBOT is in a financial crisis, it is having to make choices every day about what vehicles to replace and what to replace them with. We would like to push them in the EV direction, but that comes at a premium, and that's hard to justify when they're cutting staff. So this tranche of funding is $25 million phased over 5 years. Most of it is for new vehicles and for associated infrastructure, but we have also put in a little bit for training for our staff and for certain resiliency activities as well, like a mobile charging unit. We have estimated that this will reduce our carbon emissions 2,500 metric tons per year. So that's an ongoing benefit that every dollar helps create, not just now, but into the future, because those vehicles are constantly moving. And then also a reduction in our maintenance costs for the bureaus. We do see things coming up on the horizon, but we're still cranking on calculations for that. We know this committee is not interested in RNG, but especially for heavy duty vehicles, that's an essential bridge fuel for us to get to the 10 to 15 year mark when there are fully electric options available for heavy duty vehicles. In fact, the emissions curve, if we don't have RNG in place, is substantially higher than if we were to adopt that bridge fuel. So we are looking at some potential future tranches, but we know that that's a robust discussion that the committee probably needs to have. So right now we're just focused on the EVs. Next slide, please. Climate benefits, again, as we are replacing eligible vehicles as they reach end of life, we anticipate seeing that chart go more completely into the green with an estimated reduction of 2,500 metric tons of carbon emissions annually. We do want to note that this plan is already in place, but because of the price premium, we have a feeling, just based on previous forecasts, that only about 25% of our EV plan would be implemented, absent the additional funding that PCEF could provide. Next slide, please. With regard to community benefits, I might actually focus on the second column here first. We are 32% of our organization is non-white. And in the trades, again, union jobs, living wage jobs, that's 27%. We also see that 30% of our organization is going to retire in the next 10 to 15 years, and we are actively seeking apprenticeship programs that will help build a new green fleet workforce. So that's a strong, we have not just gotten into equity recently. Our organization has historically been at least about a third BIPOC employees, and that's just a pathway that we seek to continue in this area across our organization. From a contracting standpoint, we've been a huge supporter of BIPOC business development. I want to call out OpConnect there down at the bottom. That's a BIPOC veteran-owned business that was also an emerging small business, and we partnered exclusively with them to provide charging for our first round of ecosystem development when we were trying to figure out who could be the partner for charging all of the vehicles we were seeking to convert. We also just signed a contract, for example, with Fleet Fuels, which is a fuel provider that's, again, a BIPOC owned company. Geographically, our cars go everywhere, our vehicles go everywhere, so they emit everywhere. And so there's a general citywide improvement in air quality and health benefits when we start to get the fleet on the path to net zero. And that's it.
Thank you, Maddie. Does the committee have questions for Maddie? Megan?
Hi, yeah, I think I'm going to ask a similar question to what Maria asked of the Transportation Commissioner. And I mean, you're a little bit more of a hidden bureau or agency or whatever to the public. And so, but you know, at PCEF, we prioritize community priorities. So how can you tell us how you have come to these from a sense of community priorities?
Yeah, it's a little bit challenging. We are a very small bureau. We have no group that does community engagement. We don't have any communication staff. Again, we exclusively serve internal bureaus. I would say most of our community engagement tends to be on the contractor side. I know Alan Bates is on this call. We have heavily strived to work with and identify minority contractors that we could onboard and be partners with. The OpConnect, for example, partnership was one that he, I think, really invested a lot of time in cultivating and supporting. By getting our business, that business could then thrive and is doing fantastic. So we've invested a lot of time and space, I would say, in that contractor development space. I would also say from a workforce development standpoint, Eric Chittable is our garage operations supervisor. He has spent a lot of time in schools and community colleges, et cetera, really seeking to recruit into the trades. There are some broken links there in the apprenticeship development program between where schools leave people off and where we pick up. And so as we get additional capacity, we will really be seeking to build those links in apprenticeship. And that's again, just a lot of engagement with Benson, with community colleges, PCC, et cetera.
Ranfis?
Thank you. I appreciate this presentation. I had the good fortune of having checked out the city fleet over there at the Curry building many, many years ago. I think it's really exciting stuff. And, you know, I think transition to fleets is not going to be easy. And the transition for the workforce from folks who are operating internal combustion engines or diesel engines to electric or RNG, it's not simple. It's not like a snap in the finger. So, but in that transition, the opportunity I see is you have an opportunity to transition a new generation of workers. You're going to be tackling the questions of what do you do with the existing mechanics and fleet operators? Like, how do you transition or bring in a new generation? What are the opportunities for contracting businesses while you're ahead of the curve for the entire region? You mentioned earlier ecosystems. Like, this isn't a vacuum. You're probably going to influence how the region or the whole state looks at this. If you create an apprenticeship program for EV mechanics, that, you know, if it's done right and connects the dots, that achieves the outcomes of high retention rates and graduation rates, amazing. But to be an early adopter also means you're going to face some headaches. Like, how do you think about substation infrastructure? If you're going to deal with transitioning a fleet, I'm assuming that's a huge load demand. So I think I don't have, I'll have more maybe like detailed questions, but I think I just want to sort of acknowledge, seems like a great, opportunity. Definitely curious of all the things that you all oversee in your department. I think my only question, not for you to answer today, is like, how do you partner? How do you continue moving the needle for partnership for good outcomes, like diversifying folks into the trades, to be early pioneers or early adopters in this technology? So that's really more of a long-term question, but I appreciate, I think, so far what you presented.
Paul, if you could please hold on to your question. It's my understanding there's one more slide that Donnie is going to cover related to this section. Once Donnie reviews that slide, we'll come back and have you answer your question, please.
My question was, is there anything else like the Arlington District Concert Hall? I'll bet that's the slide.
Oh, I'm not sure, but Donnie?
Yes. Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for teaming me up. I am pinch hitting for some colleagues at OMF to just briefly walk through this project. This is a one-time opportunity here because the Arlington District Concert Hall is going through a renovation. And this is one of those examples similar to how PCEF responded to the heat dome 2 years ago, well, 3 years ago now, I guess, and that the cooling tower essentially failed this past year. And given that the opportunity here would be just to replace the unit versus what we're going to be proposing here, which is a much more advanced unit that's going to reduce their energy use in half. It's going to provide, just real energy savings for a, kind of a program that actually takes every dollar it doesn't spend on things like this and puts it back into the community through education programs. We thought this was a real win-win given the immediate need. So the project as such, it's a $9 million total project to replace the roof and the cooling tower. PCEF would be contributing the $1 million to really bridge that delta between just their standard build out versus adding these higher technology opportunities for the roof and the cooling tower. So again, this is a one-time cost for this year to replace that unit on the facility.
Paul?
Oh, no, that was my question. I didn't want to miss the slide about the Arlington District Concert Hall. That's all.
All right. Thank you,
I have
Paul.
no questions.
Thank you, Maddie. We will now move over to Parks and Recreation. Adina Long.
Great. Good evening. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Thank you. My name is Adina Long, and I'm the Director of Portland Parks and Recreation. Thank you for inviting me to join you this evening. Before I get started, I really want to thank you all for your service. The Portland Community Benefits Fund is an innovative and impactful way for the city and community to ensure that climate action efforts are implemented in benefit of all Portlanders. And I really appreciate the service that you've put towards this work. Next slide. Portland Parks and Recreation's mission is to provide equitable access to welcoming places, programs, and services that improve community health and our environment. Our annual budget is $227.4 million. Next slide. I'm here to discuss 4 significant initiatives from Portland Parks and Recreation that closely align with the principles of PCEF, and they emphasize our commitment to sustainability and equity in Portland. We'll be discussing the Mount Scott Community Center renovation for resiliency, which is a one-time request of $6.2 million. Tree protection and care, which is an ongoing request of $100 million over 5 years. The Arborist Trainee Program, which is a limited duration of 3 years, and the request is $840,000. And the final one is a transition from gas-powered backpack leaf blowers to battery-operated, and that is a one-time request of $1.6 million. Next slide. Mount Scott Community Center is located at 5530 Southeast 72nd Avenue in the Mount Scott Arletta neighborhood. The existing community center consists of an ad hoc collection of different buildings dating from the 1920s through the 1990s, with most of the building being built after the 1960s. The community center is currently closed for extensive renovations to rehabilitate and expand this beloved community asset. Portland Parks and Recreation is seeking $6.2 million from the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund for the Mount Scott Community Center renovation project to enhance the center's climate resilience. Next slide. The additional PCEF funding will enable significant investments in making Mount Scott a truly climate resilient facility. This includes installing a new photovoltaic system, solar, upgrading insulation, hydronic floor heating, efficient lighting, and low carbon concrete, all contributing to energy and carbon emission reduction. Building upgrades for severe weather response include a new HVAC system and skylights and extensive windows to access natural light during power outages, along with increased insulation for extended thermal comfort. We are exploring additional resiliency measures to optimize Mount Scott Community Center's self-sufficiency during power outages, like an on-site generator and PV battery storage. We're also considering structural enhancements for immediate occupancy, post-earthquake, and other upgrades, such as converting HVAC systems to electric, replacing the gas-fired pool boiler with an electric one, and installing a backup potable water system. Next slide. Tree protection and care climate benefits. Portland Parks and Recreation is also requesting $100 million over 5 years from PCEF for parks, urban forestry. The proposed funding will support the care and preservation of Portland's urban canopy. Included in this request is funding for the city to provide care and maintenance of the city's street trees. The funding will also support additional programmatic investments to prioritize proper care of trees to improve long-term health and preservation. This, next slide, sorry. This is a significant change from Portland's current policy, wherein maintenance of street trees has been the responsibility of the adjacent property owner. Most, if not all, US cities of Portland's size or larger maintain their street trees. Portland's long-standing policy is a known burden on property owners, especially those experiencing low income, a barrier to tree care and planting, especially in low canopy neighborhoods, and has helped perpetuate the inequitable distribution and expansion of the urban forest. Next slide. Portland Parks and Recreation's Urban Forestry Division is developing Portland's first arborist trainee program, specifically designed to address the long-standing lack of gender and racial diversity in the arborist classification and the broader arboriculture profession. This program is about more than training. It's about opening doors to new career paths. It will create substantial opportunities for career development within Portland Parks and Recreation and beyond. Next slide. The program fills an existing need by bridging the gap between introductory workforce programs offered by community partners like Blueprint Foundation and Friends of Trees, and the more advanced skills necessary for a career in tree care. The program need is $840,000 annually for 3 years. Next slide. Portland Parks and Recreation proposes to replace 112 gas-powered backpack blowers with battery-powered alternatives at a cost of $1.6 million. This proactive transition is part of our commitment to sustainability, pursuing a reduction in noise pollution and greenhouse gas emissions associated with gas-powered equipment. Next slide. The replacement process, expected to take about 1 year, includes infrastructure upgrades and workforce training. This change represents a balance between operational needs and our commitment to environmentally friendly practices. The funding will enable and allow us to expedite the transition that is aligned with a proposed City Council ordinance that outlines a new policy related to phasing out the use of gas-powered leaf blowers. These 4 Portland Parks and Recreation initiatives align with PCEF's guiding principles. Each initiative represents Portland Parks and Recreation's dedication to environmental stewardship and community well-being. Your support for these funding requests will help advance a resilient, sustainable, and equitable Portland. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Adina. Does the committee have questions? Megan?
Hi, yeah, thank you, Adina. I actually have a question about a project that's not on your list, but one I had wished was. And that's, you may know that I'm an advocate and my role in the committee is supporting regenerative agriculture that often gets lost in PCEF. Tiniest slot of funding for community orgs who we heard tonight are asking for a bit more. And you're the only agency that I'm aware of that does much in that space in the world of community gardens. And I'm curious if your bureau considered using this as an opportunity to expand staff capacity and your bureau's leadership to do more. There's already waiting lists at lots of community gardens, and it's a very understaffed and supported program relative to comparable cities. And it's just a big need and a big value of PCEF. So I'm curious if you could share a little bit about that gap.
Sure. You're right. The gap is about not having enough plots. We currently operate 60 community gardens within the city of Portland. And as I'm sure you're aware, we have partners both we lease space from partners, and we have partners that help co-manage some of the community gardens. It's certainly, in terms of regenerative agriculture, it's certainly a program that we'd be willing to put forward for future funding opportunities. Where the need is around acquisition at this point, because we just need to expand the program, and so that it's a different problem, and finding viable locations in areas where the community garden need is really the sort of the challenge. But I appreciate your interest in that, and I'd be happy to continue the conversation in another space.
Are there any more questions? Ranfis?
Just a quick one. Thank you, Dina, for the presentation. Part of PCEF's mission and within the code is the promotion of registered apprenticeship programs. Is the tree arborist program, workforce program, a registered apprenticeship program? Is that something that you all are considering or moving towards? I ask because I think one, it's, I think part of the mission of the program, but two, like I think as in other spaces, both in tree planting and regenerative agriculture, just the thing of workforce is so important, and I think Portland Parks leadership in this might be really critical as you develop things that will be adjacent as part of this broader ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I have Jen Kairos, our city forester. She's in the meeting today too, so I'll ask her to jump in if I forget anything or if she wants to highlight anything. I believe that the reason why our program is a trainee program and not an apprentice program is because of labor management situation right now. And I think that we would like to move it towards apprenticeship in the future, but this is our first go at it. And I believe that this going the trainee route was what was acceptable as it relates to labor management and our bureau and our human resources division. Jen, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Good evening, all. That is correct, Director Long.
Hey, I got it right.
Yay.
One last question from the committee. Megan.
Well, if there aren't ones from others, I'm just going to follow up on that, because you mentioned on my question earlier about regenerative ag, because you mentioned land acquisition, and in the CIP we have a little bit of land acquisition money set aside for community orgs who also struggle with that. But I'm under the impression, are you only limited to parks land? The city actually has a lot of public land, and I'm curious about interagency collaboration on acquiring land, or I'm just really interested in this program being developed more.
Yeah,
to
sure.
fill really big gaps in our PCEF funding.
I see that. No, we are not limited to Portland Parks spaces. We have community gardens on public school property. I believe that we have some on other city property as well. So no, we're not limited. And there's definitely a network of, when any city agency is interested in disposing of any property, there's like a right of first refusal. So we all learn about the parcel that's available, and other cities are in a position to acquire that parcel. So yeah, there's a full network there, and we work with nonprofits as well. So I mean, again, love to continue this conversation, and if there is an opportunity through the CIP for acquisition, we should continue that conversation. But we're currently looking for space in Southwest Portland. That's one of our community garden deserts, and it's been really challenging. And we've talked to churches and schools and lots of different organizations. So you wouldn't think it would be so challenging, but it is.
All right, thank you, Adina. All right, Donnie, we will have you come on for Bureau of Planning and Sustainability.
Okay, thanks again, Tracy. Let's just dive in. Next slide, please. Okay, so obviously you all know the Bureau through PCEF, but really BPS has a range of core city services in terms of what we're stewards for, beyond just being the home of the Clean Energy Fund. We also are the city's planning division. So we oversee the comprehensive plan, which basically sets the guidelines for how to use the land in the city of Portland. We are also the stewards of the climate emergency work plan, which is our city's climate action plan. We are the waste utility administrators. So we oversee waste collections, recycling, and organics collections in the city of Portland, both in residential and commercial. And beyond having a smart cities program, we inherited the Office of Community Technology, which is the digital justice and utility manager for the city. So that means we just oversee the right of way, not the permitting side, which our infrastructure bureaus permit and manage on an infrastructure way. We manage access to it, which is our third biggest asset and our third biggest general fund revenue. But in total, our bureau's annual operating budget is approximately $150 million. Next slide, please. So one of the things that has really evolved over the last year is how we are aligning our bureau's core climate and energy programming with PCEF. So what that looks like for us internally is there's more alignment between staff and the climate teams, helping PCEF do project analysis, but also working across the bureaus to provide support. And so the 4 projects that we've listed here are in varying ranges of development, but they all align with either PCEF work or our our climate emergency work plan. And so the 4 projects are as follows. So there's the community-based renewable energy program, which is specifically called out in our climate emergency work plan. And this is really a project of accelerating and finding partnerships for local renewable build out, and where the benefits are directly brought back into community for either battery storage or offsetting utility costs for our communities. The second group is the decarbonization and transportation program area, where PBOT is looking at how people move around the city. We're thinking about what fuels and what energy uses are moving those people. And that's, of course, in partnership with PBOT, but that's focused on the decarbonization of our fuels. And then eliminating carbon from buildings is a project that is actually community-led through a coalition called Build Shift. This would be how we approach decarbonizing existing buildings, not new buildings, but going back in and thinking about how we provide investments like PCEF investments in the CIP to create new standards to establish how we meet those goals. And then the last is sort of in alignment with everything you've heard tonight and probably future iterations of city investments. We have staff that work to help decarbonize our operations. So all the groups you had heard from tonight have staff that are sort of climate focused. So if you very sincerely in their work plans, they're thinking about climate. Not every city bureau or city office has that sort of analysis. And so BPS staff, both on PCEF side and the climate side, have been assisting other bureaus. So what does that look like in terms of impacts? Next slide, please. Overall, the city is, BPS is the steward of our climate emergency work plan. So everything we do is centered on those. The projects that are listed, the four, all are directly aligned with objectives. And I'm sorry, I just did it for my own reference. E2, B1, B2, T. Those are just the objectives in the climate emergency work plan. But for some examples of how this is going to be realized, what BPS staff do is they really set the sideboards for how future work is accomplished. So for example, when we're talking about community renewables, BPS staff helped connect the dots between Verde, Bonneville Power, the Port of Portland to create a project that was ultimately PCEF funded to build local build out in Northeast Portland that offset about like 2 megawatts of energy with renewable energy. So the work is really setting foundational partnerships that will ultimately be realized by investments, not just with PCEF, federal investments, city operation investments, as an example. The other projects also, again, are setting pathways for other people to implement. So when we think about our transportation decarbonization pathways, yes, we got to get people out of single passenger vehicles, but what are the vehicles that are on our roads being fueled by? So we look at things like replacing diesel fuel, going from combustion engines to EVs. And our target goal is a reduction of 500,000 megatons of carbon by 2030. And that team is focused on the policies that shape that. And then lastly, I alluded to helping city operations reduce a project that BPS staff with limited resources to do was actually able to work with parks to help invest in newer technology for HVAC energy efficiency. And the data there was pretty astounding. Not only were we able to reduce their annual costs by $65,000 through energy efficiency upgrades, but we were able to save approximately 100 megatons over the course of the life of the building that was upgraded. So these are ways that the city staff are helping other city staff do their work well. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick way to capture some of the community benefits across the board. BPS is not an infrastructure bureau, so we don't have a lot of workforce or contractor opportunities. However, having said that, when we look at things like our HART standards, or we look at things like setting our policies through PCEF and through our other components of our program, waste and community technology, for example, we do have high workforce standards. Having said that, when we do the work related to the decarbonization, it's really about ensuring that our colleagues across the city and our partners have the highest and best use of technology. Some of the benefits of this are indirect because our staff are not the, like I said, they're not the engineers, they're the policy analysts. And I think that's it for me on these. Yes.
Thank you, Donnie. Are there questions for Donnie? Megan?
Sorry, I was going to try to see if other committee members, but I think we'll have time for a few. Donnie, my question is similarly along the lines of what I just asked of Parks and Rec, and your projects are kind of newer for us to check out. But you know, in the world of food systems, BPS does have some roles in composting and encouraging that. And I'm very aware that the city's always been underfunded and understaffed to do any real meaningful work on this, although there's some work happening, but it's just never been funded well enough to be more than pilot and small efforts. So I'm curious if that is a thought your bureau had in the spirit of being the voice for food on this committee, why that didn't make the cut.
Thank you, Megan. So it's been alluded to earlier. We do have a pilot project in the works to, so right now our teams on the waste side generally focus on the diversion, getting, materials into the right bin, so to speak. So when we think about food security, preventing food from being disposed, so, so thinking about food banks, it's really an emerging space for us. In the spirit of being consistent with how we asked other bureaus to show up, I was hesitant to put anything in that was a new project. Having said that, we have been going after other grants to pilot a food recovery program that would, on the back end of disposal, prevent waste that could still be used and eaten, of course, from going to the composting bins and get it into the right places. And on the front end of the sort of the circular economy side, we do actually have an existing sort of a sustainable consumption strategic plan that has historically lacked resources. And so there is an opportunity for that in the future, but in the spirit of our sort of guidelines for this tranche, we stuck to things that were existing work plans.
Yeah, I totally get that from the role you're in. I will say that was not necessarily our committee guidance. That guidance on sticking to backfilling budget holes comes from other people, not our committee. And our committee generally, when we ask nonprofits, we want them to do new projects, new things. It's anyway, I just want to name that isn't necessarily what the committee would have guided. That is direction you're getting from council, the mayor, and other places. And it is an interesting dynamic that we have to confront as a committee, as we're asking for very different things from cities as we do from our nonprofit partners.
Are there other questions or comments? All right, we're getting close to now having we will have our committee discussion, and that is scheduled to be a 20-minute conversation. Sam asked if we would go to 9, but I'm an optimist, and I'm hoping we can end this discussion within 20 minutes and get out of here a little bit before 9. So this is an opportunity for the committee members to have additional conversation and ask questions if bureau directors are still around. Before we move into that, I would like to thank all bureau directors for coming and sharing information and engaging in dialogue with us. So at this time, are there committee members or that would like to start off conversation based on the presentations? D'Angelo.
Thank you for acknowledging. Before I start, I do want to appreciate all the bureau leads for coming in and taking this time to speak to everybody in the committee. Seeing the engagement of the amount of people in the room, this was, I don't get to see this often where there's actually this kind of intentional communication. So I do appreciate that. I also want to acknowledge that I do see that we are in a deficit with the city. For my theologists in the room, 7 fat years, 7 lean years, and I acknowledge that we're in the lean years. But I have a few concerns that I want to address, especially when it comes to, workforce opportunities. And I understand that this is a new space. And so for smaller contractors that it may not necessarily be easy to ease them in the space. But when I hear that there are no opportunities, but that's not followed with anything like, here are some suggestions or here what we think we can do to increase engagement with these smaller minority contracting groups in these projects, it's concerning. It's also concerning when you hear a lot about the numbers or the metrics behind it, but we can acknowledge that if we're looking at DBEs, they're mostly, just being totally honest, mostly white woman-led construction companies. So when we look at PCEF, which was started to support Black and Indigenous groups, I worry that with the precedent that I've seen the city do in some circumstances, one example being the trees that were planted in East Portland, I believe it was 30 trees or so. They got planted and they were not upkept and now they're dying. I have concerns about proper engagement. I also have concerns about defining community. I hear community used a lot as a catch-all, but when we're not defining what communities are, then it gets easy for us to say, well, we engage with community this, community that, but you can never really take accountability for what communities you did impact and what communities you did not impact. Different communities have different circumstances that require different solutions to different problems. So when we're not being intentional about what communities we're impacting and how we're actually addressing these issues with the money that's going to go on the table for these bureaus is very concerning for me. When I see this historically, I think of displacement. And so that's just a major concern that I have. I'm optimistic. I always remain optimistic. Part of my engagement on PCEF was so I could see a lot of the optimism practically. But these are just concerns that I have. And then the engagement numbers for some of the contractors that you may use. Is this going to be another good old boys club, or are we actually going to, say, we have, just an example, let's say we have $20 million going to one project. Are we going to do mini contracts to give smaller contractors the opportunity to engage and build capacity? What are we doing to really reinforce that we care about small business? We care about various communities, not just the same communities that we see that get the same benefits, but across the board. It's kind of like when I drove through East Portland through the ice storm versus West Portland, and I see the differences in, the street cleanup or the trees versus, I know people that had power out for 6 days because of that ice storm. So, I want to acknowledge, with all that being said, that I know that the city has capacity limits. I'm not saying that there wasn't an honest effort. I'm just saying that sometimes good intentions have to be met with particular plans to address particular communities. So I am optimistic that these funds will go towards the city and that they will go towards improving opportunities for smaller disadvantaged communities, that they will improve the city as a whole. But I think it's important that we specify what community is as opposed to use it as a catch-all. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Paul?
Well, Megan was before me, actually.
I'd love for you to go first, Paul, and I hope to hear from all committee members.
Oh, okay.
Tonight, I would love to hear from all. So I have my hand up, but I'm happy to go after others.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to acknowledge that the assignment that was given to the Bureau directors was coming from the leadership of the city, and that's to identify programs within your budgets that fit within the PCEF umbrella and help us reduce impacts on the general fund. I think that's what the assignment was. And then also, this is coming really quick, and we don't have a lot of information like we would with other normal RFP processes. So this is rushed, and I do have some concerns about a couple of projects. Obviously, I already voiced concern about the reserve fund for Bull Run, and then also the FERC relicensing project. I share some concerns, I think, with Rob and Wayne. And I would like to have more consideration on those two projects before we would recommend them to be funded. But back to my point about this being rushed, it also feels like it's multi-year and such a large amount of funding. And I have to question whether or not it's the right thing for us to do to make recommendations for 5 years of funding like this. Could we, because we're dealing with an immediate issue with the city and the general funds, could we have a conversation at some point about whether or not it could be less than 5 years? things might change. Maybe the economist projections might be lower in the future or higher. So because it is such a large amount of funding, I do want to express some caution here about rushing so quickly and making sure that the projects that we're approving really truly are what was intended by the voters. So I'm not saying that I've got huge concerns here. Some of these project proposals are really beautiful. I love them. I do have a few concerns about the ones I already expressed, but we don't have the luxury of slowing things down. But I do think we don't have to approve a full 5 years of funding here if we don't have to. So maybe this is a question for you, Donnie, is how do you feel about that?
Paul, thank you so much for naming that. And obviously we've discussed at length the timing just not ideal, that the rush is not consistent with PCEF's values and that this committee's processes. Maybe it's late, but I'm going to be really frank about part of the reason why the CIP was 5 years. Part of the reason why we've been looking at larger horizons to lock things in is because of the uncertainty of the future state of our city's government. Once we, right now, PCEF is under the portfolio of Commissioner Rubio, and under her direction, we've been trying to manage within the intent that PCEF is we're stewards of this fund and protected. And given the uncertainty of what's surrounding us, this felt like the most logical way to ensure that we have some semblance of control over how these dollars are spent. Because one of the things that's come up, and I want to acknowledge D'Angelo's comments are well stated. You all can help shape how these dollars are spent within these bureaus. Like, we are bringing project concepts in the sense that these are ideas that projects that bureaus have been working on, but we get to shape how they're spent over the years. This is just an allocation, much like with our strategic initiatives. We're setting the parameters of how, to Ramfi's earlier comments about looking at other workforce opportunities. Absolutely, let's do that. But I think our concern is that if we don't look at this new allocation of funding strategically, it may be left to interpretation by others who won't align with PCEF's values and principles.
Thank you for the response. I'm satisfied with that response. Thank you.
Megan?
Hi, yeah, and I appreciate that we've had kind of a chance to hear from bureau leaders and deliberate back and forth a little bit in a very rushed way, and I'm eager, as I said earlier, to use unprecedented corporate money to advance climate action in different ways, through community orgs and through city, as long as it matches PCEF values. So as I look at each of these proposals, I want to be checking, and I think we've tried to be really clear on this, are these really pushing PCEF values? And kind of to D'Angelo's earlier points, I feel like a lot of this very vagueness about community is not what PCEF values are really clear. We mean PCEF priority communities. So we mean low income, BIPOC, and workers with disabilities, and women in the trades. So we've known that for 5 years at PCEF. And I didn't hear not all the programs really were specific in that way. So as we kind of get refined proposals, I hope they'll understand that's what we mean by community. We don't mean general, we mean those specific PCEF priority communities. And I think that the potential here is if PCEF's going to be the source of money, this is a chance to change government to do that kind of work versus the work it's done in the past. So I hope that's an opportunity. I totally am on board with Paul's concern about the urgency, and I have a question, Donnie, but I want to say a few more things over the question. The question is, what happens if we don't meet this very urgent deadline of like a week from now that's been kind of handed to us? That feels really fast to make $500 million of decisions. What happens? So if you could be really explicit with us, I'd appreciate that. And then, I think I've already made my point a couple times clear. I feel like food was a total missed opportunity in any of these presentations. And I would love to see when we hear back, I'd love to see PPR, I'd love to see BPS come back to us with food projects. We're not doing a good job of that at the city, like regenerative ag, related, and food systems is a big player in our climate world and in employment and in the community needs. And I feel like the city has missed the mark on that. And this is a moment where we have a moment. We heard earlier from regenerative ag orgs that they feel really under-supported. So I think that if we don't do it now, we're missing a moment we're having. And then I have some other things I'd like in the next return back of information. I mentioned it earlier, but more broadly, I have some concerns that we're setting up expectations and a precedent for ongoing funding to city bureaus. Maybe Paul's suggestion changes that, but I'm really worried that we're setting precedents that PCEF is now just a source of funding for the city when we were designed to fund community orgs. And that's the other big thing I want to say is we heard from a bunch of public testimony in the beginning. I think we'll hear from more. If there's extra money, why aren't we talking about community orgs being part of that? And I hope, or I will request and expect that that's part of the conversation. And a proposal I would have on that is that we set aside, I'll say 100 million to have some expansiveness around our recently adopted CIP. If we get, which has all the RFP monies in there, and if we get really great projects in RFP3 from our community orgs, let's fund them more than what we said we were. We have the money, clearly. We're talking about 100 million more to city agencies at a pop when we know our nonprofits are struggling on shoestring budgets. So why aren't we engaging them in this? Like, why isn't that here? So I would expect that we do consider money for CIP, particularly the community RFPs. We heard about a need for capacity building. We heard about more money for planning projects. So I think that should be part of this package that we're considering as well. So I'll defer, or sorry, leave space for others.
Donnie, did you want to respond to Megan's question?
Yeah, the question about the timeline, what happens, sort of.
Correct.
Yeah, so frankly speaking, this committee is, the only part we're asking is not the whole 540. It's really the what we're calling the 280 first tranche plus the 100 million for parks. So it's really 380 of the 540 that is destined to go into all the bureau's proposed budgets. So anything above that would come to you all later, which I think we wanted to talk about timelines. Practically speaking, whether it's line item by line item vote or a portfolio vote, which is your decision, regardless of that outcome, that will be moved for council's decision to accept your recommendation or change it. And just to be really transparent, even if you approve all the items in this package, council still has prerogative authority to make amendment. Like there's a non-zero chance that there's more changes coming from them in the future.
I think Megan's question might have been, what if we can't meet your timeline? We just don't, like a week and a half from now.
That is a question that is, our understanding is the projects will still be loaded into bureau's budgets and will determine like what happens from that. It'd almost be like a non-vote, Paul. That was my understanding from city attorneys.
Maria?
Thank you, everyone. It's always exciting to learn how PCEF can grow and how we can accelerate our clean energy and community benefits vision in Portland. And so right now I'm really appreciating how this committee evolves and renews our commitment to PCEF guiding principles and the priority communities with each new task we're given. I heard multiple times tonight about how PCEF is providing relief to the general fund by possibly taking on these projects and these proposals. I'm part of a growing group of Portlanders who wants to increase transparency, accountability, community power, and community access to the general fund, because currently, unlike in other cities, our general fund is not open to a true participatory process. How city leaders exercise power over the general fund in the near future may not reflect community priorities, and in some indirect or direct way, PCEF actions influences or triggers those directions with the general fund. I'm just calling attention to these dynamics, even if it's slightly outside of PCEF scope. But this also draws my attention to how community members can exercise power over any amount of surplus resources, like with the amount we're deliberating on now for millions of dollars outside of the recently adopted climate investment plan. So we have the opportunity to challenge current processes and to examine how we can push community priorities and community power within PCEF and move at the pace that allows us to do this better and to make thoughtful recommendations, even incrementally. I know the committee's often been asked to do vetting better with staff and has been critiqued. to do slower vetting or to do more thoughtful vetting. And I just want to make sure that we keep that in mind to learn from past lessons. Thanks.
Renfees?
I was hoping to just try to discuss next steps, so I'll defer for other feedbacks. I see Faith's hand up, so I'll kick it over to Faith.
I don't really have much substance to add. I really wanted to just thank in this section of the discussion, I really wanted to thank my fellow committee members for your really for your attention and intention, and the way you're keeping our guiding principles top of mind. I deeply appreciate that. I have thought of this, I have tried to continue to frame my perspective as this is an opportunity. And I do think that we have an opportunity to influence not only for these dollar amounts that are requested, but for future policy in bureaus and future budget setting in bureaus, the way in which they define community. I completely agree with the many comments tonight that community is a really loosey-goosey term in this conversation that we've had and not focused on PCEF priority populations, but we can advocate for that, right? And we can condition, I think, I assume that we have some influence on conditioning our proposal and our vote on the definition of both community and the way in which workforce and contractors are defined and sought for implementing these programs. So I do continue of course, with hesitation. This is not what PCEF was designed for, but with optimism that there is an opportunity to influence the future growth of the city with this budget infusion. So I haven't lost that enthusiasm entirely, and I'm going to try to hold on to it and appreciate all of your diligence in making sure that we're asking the questions. So that was it. Sorry, Renfees, go for it.
Robin?
Yeah, thank you. So I got 3 comments. First, I second, third, fourth, I think everything else that, all the other committee members have said. In the interest of time, I'm not going to repeat that, but I wholeheartedly support everything else that's going to be said. I'll offer 2 additional comments. One is that in sitting through this discussion today, I feel that we've put a higher bar on nonprofits to secure PCEF funding than, city agencies. I feel that, just because they're a city agency, they're kind of getting a free pass. If we did this application review process for nonprofits and made decisions or recommendations to fund certain these initiatives based upon this process, the information that we have currently in front of us, we would be, on the cover of every single newspaper and saying how, we're not, properly stewarding the funds. And the irony is that, for most, PCEF priority communities, government has historically not done well, for them. And so if anything, I think we should give government, a higher bar for securing these funds. We haven't even talked about, is there going to be an audit requirement? What are the reporting requirements? These are things that we ask nonprofits to do. I feel that we should kind of have, give some consideration to how these funds are being decided upon. The third and final comment that I have here is on my screen here, I'm seeing the press release that, back in December 13th-ish, when the initial 540 million was announced. And, in that same press release, this first tranche of investments was included in that very same press release. So what that means is that city agencies had an opportunity to start thinking about how these funds are going to be spent before it was even made public. And while I understand the deadline considerations in place, this effectively shut out community, nonprofit organizations, the organizations that the initiatives that we have put in included in the CIP. It has effectively shut them out, from providing any input or even accessing these funds. And so I get it, right? Timelines, it came in Christmas time, whatever, right? Okay, but earlier today, the city economist says, they'll be reevaluating in April. Every time there's a reevaluation, for PCEF funds, it has resulted in more funds. And so my question is, how can we be sure that community is not left out, it's not shut out? The next time there is more funds, whether it's in April or 6 months, whenever that happens. We can't do this again in this manner, if there are future funds down the road. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Brian Feast will take you.
Tracy, I'd just like to just briefly chime, just more to acknowledge the reality of both time we have tonight and the sequence of getting here briefly. But one, I think we've captured a lot of folks' questions and we will be following up. I mean, there is just a reality of our 5 to 10 minutes and the ability in the dive. And so part of this is just the direction we gave to our bureau directors in terms of how much depth they're able to go to. And the reality is there's many staff underneath them that are working more closely on these programs. And so we have captured the questions and along all these lines, and we will be following up with folks. But I just want to start there. I think there's a lot that we can go back and reflect on all our processes, but I do want to certainly center that as we went through the climate investment plan, we centered community over 10, 12 months, and we explicitly did not center the city. So I think part of when we think about our planning horizons, our engagement horizons, is it takes a lot of work to do this. And I don't want to discount the really good work that happened that went into the climate investment plan, that $750 million, which we're actively working on. And the fact that there's going to be a tremendous amount of learnings over the next 5 years around those investments, centering community, what is working well, what isn't working well, before we have an ability to reevaluate, come back and add in more funding. So I just want to acknowledge that, because I think you all have been on that ride with us there too. And yet this opportunity, as imperfect as it was, is looking at an entirely different audience of folks in terms of how we administer and deliver on climate investments for our community.
Oh, Brian Feast, we're down to 2 minutes, and I know you said you would like to hear some next steps. Sam, any inklings of the agenda for next week?
Well, sorry, I just to clarify, I was hoping to propose next steps, if that's helpful. If I may jump in here.
Could we, Brian Feast, can we do that offline, given the time and that this has been an extended meeting?
I just want to sort of, given how the conversation is going, I think it's kind of just important as I think co-chair just to chime in here.
I agree. I'd like to hear from Rafis, please.
I just want to, I think recognize like the time that everyone's given to jump on this call from the community side and voice their opinions. I'm very, very much thankful for like the committee and its commitment to community needs, the PCEF principles. Like, I think we were all sworn in for this, and it's just a clear indication of just how important it is for every committee member and the community around this. Additionally, I think it's, I think very, grateful for just the presence of many of the bureau directors who are here, and Donnie. Like that to me is the beauty of PCEF right there. Like we could be discussing, having a very different conversation, or not even being part of this conversation right now. I think the beauty of the Portland Clean Energy Fund has always been, I think, really trying to change the trajectory of what the clean energy transition is. And personally never felt fully divorced from the city as an institution in and of itself. What I would like to do, I think, is just lay out some next steps. Like I understand where the concerns are, but I think what I heard from Donnie is there is an opportunity here to create some parameters. And I think we still have an opportunity to do our due diligence. I think we have an opportunity here to take the opportunity, have a following week where we can digest some of this information, create some follow-up questions. I feel like most of our conversations and questions have really fallen under just how this fits. Most of these proposals fit under our mission and principles. A continued conversation around where is the input and partnership with community. Continued elevation of just what this means for workforce and contractor development. The opportunities to leverage funding, but in many ways, just how does this fit with project soundness and the ability for implementation, and what does community oversight look like? It would be great to, ask these follow-up questions for each of the bureau directors. Additionally, would love to try to maintain a timeline where, at least for this first tranche, we can maintain that same timeline. I would additionally like to throw in, like, if we need an additional time, both to ask some of these questions and receive feedback from these directors, that we at least lay out an additional date, perhaps February 3rd as a Saturday, to further either discuss, if we need that more time to discuss and review these proposals, or potentially take that time to further refine our process for tranche 2. So I just want to propose that. I think we've heard and articulated and heard, I think, concerns here, the importance of our process. And I think there is, still an opportunity to maintain a process, elevate and further refine that process as we review the second tranche. But I too understand and hear the urgency for this committee to step up to this urgency that we're hearing from the agency. So, again, without understanding where we are on the proposals, I just want to recommend an additional date, February 3rd. And then I can sort of email again, sort of just our general bucket questions. And, I think many of you have sort of asked questions, and we can sort of put those in the categories there. So just want to pause there and get a sense how the committee feels about that as a proposal.
You had me 100% Memphis and base. It's Saturday, February 3rd. What's wrong with Friday the 2nd? But anyway, we can talk about that later.
All right, Sam, I will turn it over to you for final comments.
I think we've got a doodle poll coming your way. Friday or Saturday, we will follow up and we'll capture those. And please do email us questions so we can get them over to the bureaus here as quickly as possible. So thank you for your time. This is a long evening. I really appreciate it, and we'll look forward to connecting with you all next Wednesday evening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you again for participating in tonight's meeting.
Night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.